Under the starlit night sky, and in the shadow of the towering skyscrapers, the secret number echoed in her mind as she wondered if it was the correct password for the safe. After receiving confirmation that the password was correct, she proceeded to open the safe hidden in a dark room, which contained bundles of cash. As her hands turned the safe's dial, a bitter thought crossed her mind. She discovered that the password was nothing more than a combination of Kim Na-in's birthday and the date of her first relationship with Kang Jin-woo. However, she quickly suppressed her feelings of frustration, telling herself that now was not the time for such emotions. Her goal was clear and specific. She was determined to find incriminating evidence no matter the cost. She realized this was her only chance, taking advantage of Kang Jin-woo and Kim Na-in's preoccupation with their scandalous relationship at a time when he thought she was fast asleep under the influence of the sleeping pills he had given her. Indeed, she managed to open the safe and took out what she was looking for: the golden-covered document mentioned by Secretary Joe and the leather case containing the digital memory card. She remembered being told that Kang Jin-woo's secret safe contained the chairman's real will, in addition to dashcam and surveillance recordings that documented the painful accident scene. She recalled her conversation with Secretary Joe in the car, where she expressed concern that Jin-woo might have disposed of that evidence, but the secretary confidently denied it. Secretary Joe justified his confidence by his knowledge of Kang Jin-woo's paranoid personality, asserting that he would never discard such evidence or let it slip through his fingers, and that he certainly still kept it. Now, holding that evidence in her hands, she felt a surge of hope. She could finally prove the injustice surrounding her father's death. She looked at the evidence with determination, realizing deep down that this was the end for Kang Jin-woo and Kim Na-in. But at that decisive moment, she was startled by the sudden appearance of Kim Na-in behind her, who addressed her with mocking coldness, commenting on the presence of a thief in the place. Kim Na-in continued her sarcasm, disdainfully questioning what Mrs. Eun-jo was doing sneaking around like this, while Kang Jin-woo stood behind her in the doorway. Eun-jo raised her head in shock and anger, recognizing her rival, Kim Na-in. Then Kang Jin-woo stepped forward and addressed her by name, Eun-jo, coldly, sarcastically asking what she was doing after having such an expensive meal, which drove her to scream his name in his face out of sheer shock. Eun-jo clutched the evidence tightly and screamed, warning them not to approach, asserting that heaven would punish them for their actions. Then she addressed Jin-woo in pain, reminding him of the great trust her father had placed in him. She recalled the image of her father, Lee Won-gyu, the first ethical hacker and a pioneer in Korea's IT industry, and the founder of CXsoft. Her father had also been a loving father-in-law who cherished and deeply appreciated his only daughter's husband. Kang Jin-woo interrupted her thoughts with a mocking voice, claiming that he too had fulfilled his duty toward her father. He continued condescendingly, asking if she realized the extent of the suffering he endured to care for her cancer-stricken father, bearing his mood swings and traveling with him all over the country. Eun-jo interrupted him firmly, asserting that everything he showed was just a superficial act she had almost been deceived by, but in reality, it was a pure lie. Jin-woo was stealing her father's seal and committing crimes behind the scenes, while her father turned a blind eye because he was his son-in-law, but his evil deeds did not stop there. Jin-woo gave a cunning smile and asked if she had any evidence of the crimes she was accusing him of. Eun-jo replied confidently that the evidence was in her possession, then revealed to him that she knew of his despicable actions with Kim Na-in in her house, and that she had suppressed her anger and endured it all for a more important reason. The reason was that he caused her father's death, and therefore she was gathering evidence against him for forging the will and creating illicit funds from the company's money. She explained that after witnessing her father's accident and suffering from PTSD, Kang Jin-woo forced her to take massive amounts of psychiatric medication, wanting her to live in a state of constant daze and wandering. But she wasn't fooled. Instead, she pretended to submit to his orders all that time. She told him, coldly, that even if she didn't make it out of this place alive, Secretary Joe would go straight to the prosecution with the evidence. There was a prior agreement that if she didn't come out within the specified time limit, Secretary Joe would head to the prosecution first, noting that even without this conclusive evidence, there was enough circumstantial evidence to file a formal complaint. She concluded her speech with a direct threat, asserting that if anything happened to her here, a murder charge would be added to his long list of accusations, leaving Kang Jin-woo standing silent before her, his features frozen. She revealed her last card, a smart watch recording everything that was going on, explaining that a single press of a button was enough to send the audio recording to Secretary Joe's cloud drive. With total confidence, she screamed in his face, declaring his end, branding him a murderer. But he met her screams with a mocking smile, sarcastically whispering that she was a pitiful person, which caused a look of shock and confusion to cross her face. Then he told her with a terrifying calm, while Kim Na-in clung to his arm, that he would tell her only 3 things. The first thing was that she would not leave this place alive. The second thing was that Secretary Joe would not go to the prosecution, hinting that he had already been dealt with. He continued coldly that the evidence she gathered had already disappeared from this world, shattering her last hope. Terror seized her and she screamed in horror, asking what he had done to Secretary Joe. But he grabbed her arm firmly, declaring the third and final thing with a devilish smile, which was that they would make good use of her inheritance. In a fleeting moment, he plunged a syringe into her neck, and she could only let out a desperate, muffled cry. She felt her body stiffen and lose the ability to move, while Kim Na-in watched the scene from a distance. Then, Kang Jin-woo carried her in his arms as she was completely helpless. As he carried her lifeless body, he whispered his evil plan, explaining that shortly, she would become the Lee Yoon-jo, who could not handle depression. He carried her to the roof of their 46th floor apartment to become a tragic heiress who jumped to her death. Then he threw her from the top, bidding her farewell with cold final words. While falling downward, she was calling out to her father inside, decrying this gross injustice that should not happen. Her inner pleas turned into internal screams for help, asking for salvation from anyone. She closed her eyes in despair, pleading for survival one last time. Suddenly, time stopped around her, and a mysterious digital screen appeared before her, carrying a question. If she wanted to enter into fate, leaving her in a state of confusion. The question was repeated while she still didn't know its meaning, with only 2 options, yes or no. She wondered in confusion which choice she was supposed to make. She realized as tears streamed from her eyes that this was the end, and although she didn't understand what this thing was, she decided there was no need to hesitate as long as she was going to die anyway. So she screamed with all her might, "Yes!" The scene shifts to another place where a businessman named CEO Park was presiding over a meeting regarding investment in CX Soft, which had requested financial support from his company, MK Investment, for rehabilitation purposes. His assistant suddenly interrupted the meeting, asking CEO Park to look at the news immediately. The assistant explained that the news concerned Lee Yoon-jo, the heiress of CX, referring to her as his Yoon-jo Nuna, hinting at a previous relationship between them. Then he dropped the shocking news, announcing that she had just committed suicide, causing CEO Park's features to freeze. He repeated the news in a state of disbelief, asking if Lee Yoon-jo had really committed suicide. The assistant rushed to turn on the TV, where the announcer was reporting breaking news about finding the heiress of CX Soft deceased after falling from her residence early in the morning, with suspicions that it was an extreme choice. The announcer continued that 34-year-old Lee Yoon-jo, who was suffering from depression and panic disorder, was the wife of Kang Jin-woo, vice chairman of CX Soft, and that they had no children. CEO Park stood before the attendees in the meeting room and seriously announced that they would suspend the CX investment case for the time being. The mysterious screen returned to ask her the question again, if she wanted to enter into fate, but this time she found herself sinking into deep water, feeling severe suffocation and a desperate need to breathe. She suddenly burst out of the water, coughing violently, to find herself in a strange bathroom near an open water faucet. As she caught her breath, she realized she was in a bathtub inside a house she didn't know, wondering in confusion about her location. Her confusion increased when she noticed she was wearing clothes she didn't remember buying, and while her mind was completely muddled, she got up and stepped out of the bathtub. She tried to gather her thoughts, realizing it was natural for her mind to be clouded after going through a horrific experience like her murder. But what she saw next made her let out a sudden scream that shook the corners of the silent bathroom. When she looked in the mirror, she was hit by a violent shock. The face staring back at her was completely strange, and she asked in panic, "Who is this?" Her shock turned into absolute terror. As she touched her new face, shouting in disbelief, "Who the hell is this?" At that moment, a blue digital screen appeared before her, displaying information about her new identity. Na Eun-jo, 28 years old, occupation, model, making her wonder in amazement what was happening. Then additional information appeared on the screen, explaining that the owner of this body had died 30 seconds before Lee Yoon-jo herself, and that her consciousness had been transferred to this body immediately, making her repeat the word death in confusion. She couldn't grasp what the word transfer meant, and wondered about the meaning of all this while looking at her new hands and body. She pinched her cheek hard, wondering if she was dreaming, as everything seemed unreal. She addressed the digital screen, asking what it was, and the answer came, "It is a guide," which piqued her curiosity further. The guide explained that it was similar to the Navi system used by her father, Chairman Lee Won-gyu, Yoon-jo immediately remembered the secretarial system her father had named Navi and began to understand the strange situation she found herself in. She asked the system if it really was Navi, and it replied that it was similar but different, but it didn't mind if she called it by that name if she wanted. She went back in her memory, remembering that her father was developing a personal assistant chatbot, and the project was still in the beta testing phase, and she had thought its development stopped after his death. She concluded that this system was therefore a guide or a support system to help her intervene in her destiny. The guide Navi confirmed her conclusion, then told her that from now on she would live as Na-eun-jo and that she would be able to directly intervene in her fate. Anxiety took hold of her, and she asked about the fate of her original body, and Navi replied that it was best to see for herself. The scene shifted to the accident site, where a policeman was preventing a crowd of people from approaching, demanding they stay away from the crime scene. Yoon-jo, in her new body, stood among the onlookers and heard their whispers suggesting that the incident was a suicide. Then she saw the horrific scene of her body covered with a white sheet on the ground, with her blood-stained hand protruding, and she trembled at the horror of the sight. Kang Jin-woo arrived at the scene, playing the role of the bereaved husband, pushing through the crowds and police screaming Eun-jo's name, while onlookers whispered about the tragedy of this poor husband whose wife committed suicide. Jin-woo completed his masterfully crafted performance, embracing the covered body while screaming, asking why she did it and how he was supposed to live without her. She looked at him while in her new body feeling intense disgust, fully aware of the truth about that loathsome man. Elsewhere, CEO Park was sitting in his car, thinking about the news of Lee Yoon-jo's suicide, which seemed completely unreal to him. He recalled a memory from 11 years ago, which was still as vivid in his mind as if it happened yesterday. In that memory, young Lee Yoon-jo was trying to reach a book on a high shelf in a library, but it fell from her hand, only for young Park to catch it at the last moment. He handed her the book. She thanked him and asked if he was one of her father's guests in their first meeting. Park recalled that moment when she introduced herself saying her name was Lee Yoon-jo. The scene cuts back to the present, where Park arrived at the funeral home with his assistant telling him they had arrived. Park stood before her picture in a black frame decorated with white flowers, thinking of Lee Yoon-jo, who was never the type to commit suicide. He placed a white chrysanthemum before her picture, realizing she also wasn't the type suited for this kind of sad flower. While there, Kang Jin-woo arrived, and one of his companions introduced him to the vice chairman, saying this was the CEO of MK, Park Joo-hyun, which surprised Jin-woo. Jin-woo asked in confusion why a prominent figure like Park had come to this place, and Park calmly replied that he was an acquaintance of the deceased, which increased Jin-woo's puzzlement. Park explained that he had briefly taken art lessons from Lee Yoon-jo. Jin-woo gave a nervous laugh and said he thought his wife was a famous artist, trying to hide his confusion. Park looked at him with disdain, thinking to himself that everything Jin-woo was saying was mere nonsense. After paying his respects, Park left the place, leaving behind mixed feelings of sadness and anger. His memory returned again to Kang Jin-woo, who was described as the Cinderella of CX Soft, the man who rose the social ladder through marriage. Park felt that if Jin-woo was lucky enough to get a wife and a father-in-law who surpassed him in status, he should have lived gratefully for this opportunity. But for this vulgar man to be Lee Yoon-jo's husband and the chief mourner at her funeral was unbearable. Anger possessed him as he thought of Jin-woo, and he couldn't help but curse him in secret. As Park was walking outside the funeral home, he was surprised to see a blonde woman standing before him, recognizing her immediately. It was Na-eun-jo. Na-eun-jo was a model at Hera Entertainment Agency. Park approached her and asked if she was okay, but she responded with a confused question about his identity. She looked at him in confusion, trying to recognize him, and uttered his name hesitantly. Park Joo-hyun. Park spoke to her seriously, reminding her that it was proper etiquette to address the investor of her agency with appropriate titles, as he was not exactly her friend. Yoon-jo realized at that moment that she wasn't Lee Yoon-jo now, feeling confused as she thought about what to say. Park asked her boldly what she was doing there and if she had come to see him, then pointed out that they had already finished their conversation last time. She wondered in secret what had happened last time, as she had no memories of Na-eun-jo's life. Park's anger increased as he reminded her that he had nothing more to say to her, warning her of the consequences of persisting in this matter. She ignored his threat and told him that she knew this girl, Na-eun-jo. Park asked in confusion if she and Na-eun-jo knew each other, surprised by her strange behavior. Then he saw Kang Jin-woo comforting a collapsed Kim Na-in, who was tearfully asking him what they would do now. Yoonjo turned to them, a look of fierce anger on her face after remembering what they had done to her. Meanwhile, Park noticed the change in Yoonjo's expression and wondered in surprise about the reason for that look. She suddenly regained her composure and told him she was leaving, then turned and left while he remained watching her in confusion. The real Na-eun-jo was a model at Hera Entertainment, an agency funded by MK Investment, which Park owned. Although she had a beautiful face and body, she was a troublemaker, constantly in the headlines of newspapers and websites due to her sharp tongue, reckless behavior, and ongoing scandals. Park recalled a party held to celebrate an investment deal with Hera Entertainment. An unexpected scandal broke out with a rookie model whose name he didn't even know after she bumped into him and spilled a drink on his clothes. Later, her manager sternly ordered her to apologize to him immediately, asserting that she was clearly at fault in this situation. She replied coldly, saying she was sorry, justifying her action by saying she heard Park Joo-hyun from MK was handsome, so she was just checking him out and didn't think it would cause a scandal. That model was called Navi, and her real name was Na-eun-jo, but her reckless way of speaking and rebellious looks didn't suit the name Yoonjo at all, which carries meanings of tenderness. Park looked at her with disdain then and commented that her name was wasted on her. But he wondered to himself if the power of a name was always this strong, as the image of Na-eun-jo overlapped in his mind with the real Lee Eun-jo. Na-eun-jo offered him with a bold smile to buy him a drink as an apology for what happened. How much he regretted that mistake as he agreed to drink with her just because she carried the name he had long yearned for and missed hearing. He started calling her Miss Na-eun-jo, then Miss Eun-jo, and finally settled for calling her Yoonjo, while gazing at her under the dim lights of the place. He indulged with her that night, not out of desire for her herself, but because he finally loved his ability to utter the name he only repeated in secret. To him, she was just a woman sharing the real Yoonjo's name, nothing more. And on that night when their hands intertwined, he was fully aware that he was embracing her instead of the real Yoonjo, whom he could not reach. But the next morning, she shocked him with her bold request for money, claiming she needed a settlement amount to silence a journalist. She said with a cunning smile that he was the only person she could ask for money from at the moment. When he asked what would happen if he refused, she clearly threatened him that she would spread rumors about what happened between them last night, asking if that would suit him. Park felt intense disgust then, feeling that any shred of affection or attraction he had left had completely vanished before her greed. Park returned to his reality inside the car, thinking sarcastically that he had considered for a moment taking responsibility for that woman, but he couldn't grasp the idea that a woman like her knew Lee Yoon-jo, and that they shared some kind of relationship. His assistant Kim Gyu, sitting in the front seat, asked him if he knew the model Na-eun-jo, and he appeared surprised. Kim Gyu explained his meaning, noting that Yoonjo Nuna, meaning Mrs. Lee Yoonjo, was present at the accident site. The assistant handed him a tablet, asking him to look at a news article, with signs of amazement on his face. The article showed a picture of citizens watching the accident scene in Seoul Forest and a woman crying bitterly in. The picture caught his attention, wondering if she was Na-eun-jo. He remembered that at that time the victim's identity hadn't been confirmed yet, making him ask suspiciously, "Does that mean she knew in advance who jumped?" He ordered his assistant Kim Gyu to investigate Na-eun-jo immediately, focusing specifically on her relationship with Lee Eun-jo. He thought about her being a woman he spent one night with 3 months ago, and the only information he knew about her was her name, job, and age. Although he found it funny to suddenly feel curious about Na-eun-jo now, he desperately needed to know the nature of her relationship with Lee Yoon-jo specifically. Meanwhile, Eun-jo was sitting on a garden bench talking to Navi, confirming the agreement that she would live as Na-eun-jo from now on and intervene in fate. The system confirmed this to her, so she asked a fundamental question about the reason she didn't die. The response came via the blue screen that it happened because she wished to intervene in fate, while she wondered about the real reason behind such a miracle happening to her. A message from the system appeared before her with a mysterious message indicating that a desperate longing of someone has arrived, which piqued her curiosity, so she asked with annoyance about the nature of this vague answer that was not satisfying. But she soon sighed in resignation, deciding to stop asking more questions, and sat on the garden bench thinking sincerely that her soul entering another person's body right before death lacked logic from the start. She felt sorry for Na-eun-jo, who chose to end her life by suicide at this young age, but at the same time she realized that what mattered now was that this incident represented an opportunity. Her eyes sparkled with a sharp look as she decided that this was her chance for revenge, setting an initial goal of returning to Trifoil to retrieve the evidence. She wondered if it was impossible to obtain Na-eunjo's memories so she could adapt. Navi explained that it wasn't impossible, but warned her that the experience might be very unpleasant, depending on the nature of those memories. Eunjo realized the truth of that. It's natural that looking into another person's life, especially someone who chose suicide, would be painful and disturbing. But another motive was driving her, so she wondered in secret if that person would also appear somewhere inside Na-eunjo's memories. The system confirmed her approval to view 1 year of Na-eunjo's life and asked if she wanted to see it, and she agreed without hesitation. Then the scene shifted to a bedroom where Park Joo-hyun was sleeping. He was dreaming of a massive fire consuming a building, while Joo-hyun stood before it with flames flying around him. He heard Eunjo's voice calling him Mr. Joo-hyun, while blue butterflies obscured her face in the dream. He saw a bag full of money and a warning letter asking Mr. Park Joo-hyun to leave immediately. Joo-hyun woke up sweating and clutching his head in pain, repeating that everything had become meaningless now because Eunjo was gone forever. The scene shifted to the crematorium, where Kim Na-in was pretending to cry bitterly and calling Eunjo my big sister. Park watched Kang Jin-woo carrying his late wife, Lee Eunjo's picture with fake sad features, and in his heart he described Jin-woo as a pitiful man who possessed Eunjo, but failed to protect her. Park Joo-hyun noticed Eunjo's presence there, looking at her in surprise, wondering about the reason for Na-eunjo's presence at Lee Eunjo's funeral. Their eyes met, and Joo-hyun noticed that familiar look in her eyes again, a look carrying clear hostility and unmistakable disdain. Doubt began to seep into his soul, and she wondered about the real link that brought Na-eunjo to these people. Park kept watching her facial expressions, as he began to suspect she knew something about Lee Eunjo's death. But besides that, he felt that Na-eunjo's movements were light as a butterfly, like Lee Eunjo's movements. And he wondered about the reason for that similarity. Inside the restroom, Kim Na-in was talking on the phone, boastfully confirming that all of Lee Eunjo's assets and properties now belong to her dear husband. She continued her conversation while applying lipstick, answering the other party that the wedding would of course take place, but not immediately. She added with a wicked smile that they needed to cry a little over the dead woman, comfort each other, and then fall in love, claiming that such a scenario would be convincing and successful. At the same time, Kang Jin-woo was washing his hands in the men's restroom, telling himself that if CX became his, it didn't matter what criticism he received, even if it was from his grandfather. Kim Na-in continued her evil talk, suggesting registering the marriage first as a guarantee, justifying it by her need for a security device, for whoever betrayed once cannot be trusted not to betray twice. Suddenly, Eunjo came out from one of the stalls, wondering about the marriage registration Kim Na-in was talking about, and she responded to Na-in's suggestion in a decisive and firm tone that this was impossible. Eunjo left the place and walked in the garden, thinking painfully that it wasn't enough to see her broken body, but she had to come all the way to the crematorium too. She thought angrily that even until now she was forced to meet that disgusting murderous duo, and decided to walk a little to clear her mind. While she was walking on a path, lined with autumn trees with golden leaves, a luxury black car stopped beside her, and a man looked out and asked if she was on her way home. She turned in surprise to find that the driver was Park Joo-hyun, so she whispered his name in amazement. She was thinking to herself that she had expected his presence at the funeral hall, not only because of his connection to her, but also for the relationship he had with her father. But she never expected him to follow her all the way to the crematorium. Her memory returned to her previous relationship with Park Joo-hyun, which didn't end beautifully at all. They had spent 3 years together, starting from when she was 24. He was her first love for whom her heart constantly fluttered, and she shared her first kiss with him. But everything ended suddenly when he left to study abroad without prior notice. So their relationship ended at that point. The unexpected thing was what Na-eunjo's memories, shown to her by Navi, revealed. It was the image Na-eunjo kept of Park Joo-hyun in her memory. Park interrupted her thoughts, telling her that the tunnel ahead was very long, leaving her looking confused. He explained to her that it was difficult to walk all this distance on foot and offered to give her a ride in his car. She wondered about the reason for this offer and thought sarcastically whether he was afraid she would cause another scandal that might lead to losses in Hera Agency's investment funds. She remembered that after the scandal between him and Na-eunjo spread, Park Joo-hyun confronted her coldly, asserting that he was not the kind of person who could get involved in such cheap scandals. Na Eun-jo asked him then in surprise what he meant by the word cheap. He replied sharply that all his actions were monitored, and his involvement in a scandal with a reckless, vulgar, and troublemaking woman was insulting to him. Na Eun-jo replied with biting sarcasm, wondering if scandals also had to rise to a certain level, and for whom he was trying to prove all this. The first meeting between Park Joo-hyun and Na Eun-jo was the worst ever, and his cold looks toward her didn't change until after he learned her name was Yoon-jo. She clearly recalled how Na Eun-jo boldly offered herself to him that night, asking him if he wanted to spend the night with her. Although he refused at first, saying he doesn't sleep with just anyone, she insisted, suggesting they start with a kiss, and that he call her Yoon-jo, with the same friendly tone he used earlier. She returned to reality, to address him with sarcasm fitting for the Na Eun-jo character he knows, asking if he needed a woman tonight too, as happened last time, but he told her that he needed her again and offered her more money to silence a journalist. She realized that this was the image Park Joo-hyun sees of her, a woman obsessed with money and easily accessible to any man anywhere. She wondered to herself for a moment what the real Na Eun-jo would have said in this situation, but she made up her mind and rejected his offer coldly, saying she preferred walking and wished him a safe drive. As she walked away, the car began moving behind her. Park called her in a firm voice, asking her to stop acting strange and going out of her usual character, and ordered her to get into the car. She complied with his order and got into the car, which drove her past the Trifoil building. He surprised her with a direct question about why she went to that place. She felt confused and thought that she didn't want to treat him this way, but she realized that the real Na Eun-jo wouldn't have felt satisfied with this situation either. She feigned stupidity, claiming she wasn't smart enough to understand his vague hints. Then he rephrased his question with sharp clarity, then asked her why she went to the Trifoil building in Seoul Forest at dawn on September 14th. He confronted her with the fact that he knows she was at the Lee Eun-jo accident site. She tried to hide her confusion, claiming she lives nearby and insomnia kept her from sleeping, so she went out for exercise, coming across the accident scene by chance. But he wasn't convinced by her answer, asking her coldly if this was all, and she answered defiantly, what else could it be? He continued pressing her, doubting her story, and questioning the logic of her going out for exercise at that late hour wearing a dress and sneakers, and why she was crying while inspecting the place. She replied with feigned anger, asking if he was investigating her, then accused him of hinting that she was the one who killed Lee Yoon-jo, considering that this crossed all boundaries even if he looked at her with contempt. The Joo-hyun that Na Eun-jo knew was completely different from the warm Joo-hyun who remained in her own memory. For Na Eun-jo, he was not a good man at all. In her eyes, he was an arrogant, cold, cruel man who didn't care about others' feelings. It was true that Na Eun-jo was the one who initiated approaching Park Joo-hyun because of her desperate need for money, as she was about to get involved in another scandal that would completely end her career. One of the journalists was demanding a huge settlement amount from her to bury the scandal, but she didn't have any money. In light of her despair and lack of any other skills, she found only one way, which was spending a night with Park Joo-hyun and asking him for money. Despite realizing the wrongness of her action, she didn't hesitate to threaten him shamelessly, asking if he would be comfortable if news about the night they spent together spread. But he faced her threat with freezing coldness and threw a check at her while telling her that she should have been more clever as long as she didn't possess intelligence. Then insulted her, saying that one night means nothing to him, and women of her kind are not rare. His harsh words wounded her, so she asked him in pain if he was forced to say that even if she meant nothing to him, then screamed in his face that she would return the money to him. She returned to the present in the car and addressed him sharply, reminding him that he's not a prosecutor and she's not a defendant. She followed her speech, asserting that she doesn't know what Lee Eun-jo's death means to him, but his behavior isn't right. She told him firmly that he doesn't have the right to interrogate her, and she is not obliged to answer, then declared she would leave the car because she was about to reach her destination. She stepped out of the car, bidding him farewell coldly, while he remained watching her with mysterious looks as she walked away. She walked in a narrow alley until she reached her apartment, where she collapsed at the door, catching her shallow breaths. Her words echoed in her mind when she told him he didn't have the right to ask her, and she wasn't obliged to answer. And she remembered when he asked her, what if Lee Eun-jo's death meant that his world had collapsed? And would he then have the right to ask her? She laughed sarcastically at this thought, describing him as a fool, for what he said was just a lie and empty words, and she is the best to know the truth of its falsity. She remembered how they shared the deepest feelings for 3 whole years, Despite that, Park Joo-hyun took everything from her and disappeared like the wind, so much so that she learned the news of his traveling to study abroad through her father. Over 8 whole years, her heart couldn't fill the void left by his departure. In the midst of her despair, she married, but even marriage didn't heal her broken heart. She thought that if it was really so, he shouldn't have appeared in her life again. He returned as CEO of the prestigious MK Investment, but he didn't try to contact her even once. The pain of those memories faded with time and turned into just a gentle spring breeze. And in the end, she realized that her value to him didn't exceed this limit. Anger possessed her as she thought he's now claiming his world collapsed, wondering why he tells her such lies. She wondered in confusion and pain why a man who erased her from his life for 8 years shows all this longing in his eyes just from hearing the name Yoon-jo. She wondered in confusion about the truth of Park Joo-hyun and the face he hides behind his cold mask. She soon rebuked herself for the silliness of this thinking, asking sarcastically if she really wanted to believe that he still carries any feelings for her. She realized deep down that it was impossible, and that she had to stop clinging to illusions. She stood in the middle of the small room, having resolved to face reality and all its cruelty. She decided that her first step would be searching through the traces Na Yoon-jo left behind to understand her life better. She sat before her laptop and started searching, so she learned that Na Yoon-jo, and her stage name Navi, dreamed of becoming an international model. But her short stature prevented her dream's realization, so she was forced to work as a model for sizes and magazines, work that was no longer available to her now. She discovered that her relationships with her colleagues at Hera Entertainment were very bad, so much so that she was nicknamed the Beautiful Outcast or Beautiful Trash. And after she checked her 2 bank accounts, she was shocked that all she possessed in savings didn't exceed 1.72 million won. Her shock increased as she thought that this was her entire balance, while the rent of her modest apartment was 500,000 won, and she wondered how someone her age could save only this meager amount. The reason was clear. She didn't have stable work and spent any money she earned immediately without any planning for the future. Yoon-jo realized that Na Eun-jo's life, unlike her own, was tragic from the start. She was an orphan with no support, living a life like hell every day, and no matter how hard she tried, her situation never improved. She felt a responsibility toward her, and decided she should live Na Eun-jo's life too, but she had to focus now on what she must do as Lee Yoon-jo. She listed her priorities. First, opening Kang Jin-woo's secret safe in the Trifoil building. Second, finding Secretary Jo. And third, meeting her father's colleagues and asking for their help. But before everything, she had to find a way to return to Trifoil. She desperately needed to retrieve the memory card containing her father's real will and the various video evidences incriminating her killers. She wondered in confusion how she could achieve that, for in her current situation, she couldn't even approach Kang Jin-woo, who appeared in her eyes as just a clumsy fool. She wished Secretary Jo was by her side, for perhaps they could have devised a clever plan. But now she doesn't even know if he's alive or dead, and reckoned that if he were alive, he wouldn't have hesitated a moment to attend her funeral. She sighed in despair. The Trifoil residential building enjoys tight security, and it's impossible for her to enter simply. In the midst of her despair, her phone rang suddenly, and the caller was CEO Jung So-hyun. Elsewhere, Park Joo-hyun was sitting in a bar with his assistant Kim Gyu, who asked him with concern if he was okay, and Park responded sharply, asking if he appeared otherwise. Kim Gyu told him that Lee Eun-jo was not just an ordinary person to him. He continued his speech explaining that Park used to choose his partners and even his marriage partner very carefully, with the intention of presenting them to Lee Eun-jo. But that selection process continued until everything ended with her death. Park pretended not to remember, driving Kim Gyu to ask him sharply if he was joking. It is revealed that Park Joo-hyun is the legendary genius from the computer engineering department at Korea University who created an amazing security program in his early 20s, earned billions, and received offers from top companies. Even Chairman Lee Won-gyu, Yoon-jo's father, admired him and distinguished him from others, turning a blind eye to his relationship with his daughter. And Joo-hyun, who was expected to become the son-in-law of CX Soft, left Korea suddenly one morning, and the reason for his departure remained a mystery among his peers until today. Kim Gyu said he knows the reason, and asked Park to forget the matter now, for Lee Yoon-jo has died, and she didn't just marry, but passed away. Park interrupted him sharply, asking him to stop and asserting that he is not the gloomy type who lives attached to a dead woman. Kim Gyu asked him if that meant he wouldn't investigate Na Eun-jo's matter, and Park replied asking for the reason. Kim Gyu reminded him of his words said shortly before, wondering about the reason for this contradiction after he confirmed he wouldn't attach to a dead woman and wouldn't be that gloomy man. But Park interrupted him with silence, then issued his order firmly asking him to investigate her. He explained that he desperately needed to know if Na Eun-jo had approached him intentionally while knowing of his previous relationship with Lee Eun-jo. Meanwhile, Eun-jo was in her apartment thinking about the call she received from Jong So-hyun, who was the only person at Hera Agency who treated Na Eun-jo kindly, and she realized that after 3 months of unemployment, she had to accept any work he offered her. After all, she had to secure her food and pay her apartment rent. Most importantly, she desperately needed an opportunity or catalyst to move her plan, so she decided she must go no matter the cost. To prepare for the interview, she asked Navi to provide her with some guidance, like a list of people she should avoid. The response came quickly and clearly, as the system warned her of Chae Jong-hee. Navi explained that based on Na Eun-jo's memories spanning 1 year, Jong-hee was the most evil character and the worst adversary for her at Hera Entertainment. Eun-jo thought she should prepare to face her as well. Upon her arrival at the Hera Entertainment headquarters, she caught the attention of some employees who wondered if that was Navi walking there. One of them confirmed her identity, while another commented in surprise on her features, which appeared relaxed unusually. Chae Jong-hee was sitting with a journalist, but she excused herself for a few moments, saying there was someone she had to greet. Jong-hee stepped toward Eun-jo and called her by her stage name, Navi, in a commanding tone. Eun-jo turned and faced her with a steady look, triggering Jong-hee's surprise, who wondered in secret about the reason for her boldness, for usually, Na Eun-jo was the one to lower her gaze first. Jong-hee continued her provocation, but Eun-jo interrupted her, then reminded her of an old event, saying, "Last June, in Bali with CEO Kim Min-soo from Hanyang Company." Jong-hee's features froze as shock hit her, and she wondered in panic how she learned of that matter and how this news leaked. She screamed in her face in confusion, asking her what she was talking about and demanding her silence. But Eun-jo ignored her screaming and entered the elevator, saying coldly that she heard Bali is beautiful and advised her to go there again, but with her husband this time. The elevator door closed, leaving Jong-hee standing alone in the lobby, fuming with anger. She turned to the journalist who was watching the situation and said angrily, "Is she under the influence of drugs?" and wondered if she had gone mad, and who she thinks she is to cause a scene before her. She describes her as a third-rate cheap model who dared to mess with her. Jong-hee wondered to herself how on earth Na Eun-jo learned of her trip to Bali with CEO Kim Min-soo, and felt she was about to lose her mind. Inside the elevator, Eun-jo thought that Chae Jong-hee is far from being a respectable person, and what bad luck to bump into her right after Navi's warning. Chae Jong-hee, or as she's nicknamed the Queen of Hera Agency, was a character who contributed greatly to Na Eun-jo's suicide. The collective bullying Na Eun-jo was subjected to began at the start of this year, when a scandal of a relationship between Jong-hee's lover and Na Eun-jo spread, followed by other actors joining in harassing her. Jong-hee was living a double life. On one hand, she has a respectable husband, and on the other hand, a wealthy lover, in addition to another young lover. And Eun-jo wondered if she would be able to defend herself if all these facts were exposed to the media. As Lee Eun-jo, she knew Chae Jong-hee, even if there was no direct acquaintance between them. The reason was that Jong-hee's lover, CEO Kim Min-soo, from Hanyang, was a friend of Kang Jin-woo and lived with his wife in the same trifoil building. Because of that, Lee Eun-jo became close to Kim Min-soo's wife, and naturally, she heard a lot from her about Chae Jong-hee. And she remembered when Kim Min-soo's wife told her with contempt that the title national actress doesn't suit Chae Jong-hee, for she is in the end just a traitor and a bold adulteress who travels openly abroad with another woman's husband. Eun-jo remembered her conversation with Kim Min-soo's wife and how she had hired people to gather photographic evidence of her husband's infidelity, which included photos of him with Chae Jong-hee in Bali, Sweden, and Switzerland. Min-soo's wife was planning to collect that evidence and use it later in a divorce lawsuit to ensure she received a larger share of his assets. At that time, Min-soo's wife encouraged her to do the same, pointing out that she too should gather evidence well, but in her case, the goal would be to preserve her property rather than gain more. Eun-jo returned with her memory to the present, standing in the office of CEO Jong So-hyun, realizing that the relationship between Kim Na-in and Kang Jin-woo was not at that same level of complexity. So-hyun interrupted her thoughts by offering her a job opportunity in a special fashion show for the Saint Lawyer brand, explaining that international models would be on the runway, while fitting models would be on the floor. Eun-jo immediately rejected the offer, claiming that the other models would likely bully her, which So-hyun agreed with. Then So-hyun suggested another alternative, which was attending a VIP party hosted by Roxy, where aspiring models and actresses are integrated among the guests. But Yoon-jo ignored the suggestion while browsing through another file, prompting So-hyun to comment. Hesitantly, Yoon-jo grabbed the file confidently, declaring that she would choose this job, which was the opening event of the Festival of Light at the Dane Art Center. So-hyun explained to her that this work was not in the field of fashion modeling, but rather for her husband's company, which needed good-looking assistants. But Yoon-jo insisted on her choice. Yoon-jo thought about her decision, for since So-hyun's husband had not appeared in Na Yoon-jo's memories of the past year, this meant there was no significant contact between them, making it a safe choice. But suddenly, the Navi system screen appeared before her, revealing shocking information. So-hyun's husband, Min Won-gil, is the director of Zeus Security, the company responsible for managing the Trifoil building. She was struck by amazement as she realized that this company manages Trifoil as well, and she asked the system in her heart if this screen was visible to others. So-hyun noticed her distraction and asked why she was staring into space, to which Eun-jo replied confusedly that it was nothing. So-hyun continued explaining the nature of the work at the art exhibition, clarifying that they were looking for guides who possess knowledge and intelligence. But she added sarcastically that they probably asked her to nominate some beautiful girls just for appearance. So-hyun sighed, explaining that in reality they were looking for high-class assistants who could speak tactfully with the wealthy. Then she told her clearly that she was not the right person for this job because she did not attend university. Yoon-jo wondered if a university degree was among the admission requirements, and So-hyun replied in the negative, but added that Na Eun-jo's style of speaking was not refined. She continued her insult rudely, questioning the extent of her ignorance as she didn't even know the correct rules of spelling. Yoon-jo replied sharply that she knew spelling very well, and that she would only be speaking there, so spelling had nothing to do with it. So-hyun tried to calm her down, calling her by the name Navi, only for Yoon-jo to assure her that she would not let her ignorance show, and that she realized this was a place where she could not cause trouble. So-hyun thought that Na Eun-jo was always a troublemaker wherever she went, which led to the deterioration of her status in the industry, and that she was trying to protect her now, but she felt that the things she used to worry about would not happen this time. She pointed out to Yoon-jo that the offered pay was less than half, and Yoon-jo acknowledged to herself that she knew that too. Yoon-jo knew a secret that So-hyun did not know, which was that Lee Yoon-jo herself was the one who planned this event. The pay that So-hyun knew was the basic salary only, for this event included many hidden side tasks that the security company knew nothing about. Therefore, instead of the low pay being an obstacle, Yoon-jo saw it as an additional reason to go, for few models would accept it, which cleared the way for her. So-hyun asked her if she was sure she wouldn't regret it, and Yoon-jo replied with absolute confidence that she would never regret it. So-hyun reluctantly agreed and asked her to execute what was written in the contract, then allowed her to leave after Yoon-jo thanked her. As Yoon-jo was leaving, So-hyun called her again, surprised by her strange behavior today, from her use of formal language to her bowing upon greeting, and asked her sarcastically if she had taken some drugs. Yoon-jo replied calmly that it wasn't those kinds of drugs, but confessed to taking some sleeping pills a few days ago. When So-hyun asked her about the number she had taken, she replied hesitantly that it might have been 30 pills. So-hyun was terrified and screamed in her face, asking in horror if she had gone mad, for such a dose could kill her. It was Jung So-hyun who had recently taken Na Eun-jo to the hospital because of her suffering from depression, where antidepressants and sleeping pills were prescribed for her, but she did not realize how powerful the effect of those medications was. So-hyun continued scolding her sharply, wondering if she thought anyone would grieve for her if she died. Rather, they would probably dance with joy. To which Yoon-jo replied calmly saying she knew that. But with a confident smile, she told her that this was precisely why she didn't die, but rather returned to life anew. The Festival of Light she was preparing for was a secret exhibition sponsored by a group of wives of top businessmen known as Bayer Younghui, and organized by a group of famous artists called Yeonhui. Moreover, the Luange Cultural Foundation, with its prestigious international status in the art world, was the one that selected the paintings with extreme care. And for these reasons, the festival became an exclusive event that no one could enter or even receive an invitation to. As a former director at Yeonhui, Lee Yoon-jo was the one who set the strict conditions for the assistants in this event, where knowledge of art, party etiquette, and conversation skills were essential and indispensable matters. As she walked toward her destination, she realized there was something she had to do first. she decided to change her appearance, entering a beauty salon, realizing that in her current state as Na Eun-jo, she would not be able to leave a positive impression on the members of the upper class. She knew that if she failed to leave the desired impressions, she would end up receiving the basic pay and returning disappointed, which she would never accept. So her hair color was changed from blonde to a more sober dark brown. Then she thought she needed to buy some clothes as well, for although they would provide her with a uniform, she did not own decent clothes to wear on her way there. All of Na Eun-jo's clothes were either excessively revealing or lacked elegance, which she found completely inappropriate. On her way back to her apartment, she was surprised by a text message on her phone from Park Joo-hyun, asking if they could meet tonight. She wondered in confusion about the reason for this sudden invitation, and why now in particular. Na Eun-jo's memories returned to that night following their meeting, when she told him she would pay him back the money, then boldly offered that if he needed a woman at any time, he only had to call her and she would fulfill his request. That was said in a moment of anger, but it was a sincere offer too, because Na Eun-jo was completely satisfied with the night she spent with Joo-hyun. That was a memory dating back 3 months ago, and not from her own memories of 8 years ago, as she recalled the details of the intimate encounter between Na Eun-jo and Park Joo-hyun. It was unnatural for Joo-hyun to embrace another woman while he still madly desired the woman he abandoned 8 years ago, but that night was the end of everything. Na Eun-jo demanded money, and Joo-hyun coldly turned his back on her. Although Na Eun-jo tried to cling to him several times after that, he ignored her harshly. Now, after all this rejection, Eun-jo wondered about his sudden desire to meet. She was possessed by a conviction that such a relationship, based on physical desire only, was not right at all. So she stood firmly, asserting to herself that it was impossible to have such a relationship with Park Joo-hyun, a relationship in which there is only physical desire and the heart is absent. With total decisiveness, she wrote a reply to his message, rejecting his request and asking him to forget about her. She sent the message and went on her way, declaring in secret that the relationship between Na Eun-jo and Park Joo-hyun had officially ended. On the promised day of the Festival of Light, she headed to the Daya Art Center. She had prepared herself carefully, light makeup and without any accessories, settling for a wristwatch to track the time. She looked at her new self in the mirror, wearing an elegant formal suit and tying her hair back, feeling she was ready to go. She walked with confident steps toward the building, realizing that this place was not just an exhibition for appreciating and buying paintings, but rather an arena for buying tastes, sharing social status, building relationships, and investing money to grow wealth. She stood in the foyer of the art exhibition, recalling in her memory how 4 whole years had passed since she planned this event herself as Lee Eun-jo. Meanwhile, the supervisor was giving her final instructions to the assistants, emphasizing the necessity of remembering one basic rule. Every assistant would be exclusively responsible for 2 guests, taking charge of guiding them in the exhibition hall and meeting their needs precisely, with a promise of an additional bonus depending on the quality of performance at the end of the event. She looked around at her colleagues and realized that many of them were young art students, making this opportunity of utmost importance for their professional future. As she held the guest list, she thought that outstanding performance might guarantee her a permanent patron, a precious opportunity beyond price for these ambitious young people. She held a small voice recording device, realizing that the decisive step now lay in identifying the appropriate personality to whom she would attach this microphone to achieve her secret goal. When the arrival of the guests was announced, she and her colleagues stood in a state of full alert to receive them at the entrance. The followed procedures required assistants to hand the microphones to the guests upon receiving them, so they, in turn, could attach them to the collars of their clothes. Although the guest has the right to refuse the designated assistant and choose another, this matter was a rare occurrence. The reason for this is that applicants for the assistant position at this prestigious festival spend a whole year in preparation and learning the required etiquette, making them provide the service to the fullest extent, so no one finds a reason to reject them. Only 5 assistants remained, she among them, waiting either for the arrival of one of the late VIPs or because they remained after another assistant won the guests they were aspiring to serve. Her attention was caught by her colleague who came with her from the Hera agency, and she remembered that her name was Yang Yi-soo. Yang Yi-soo appeared as a beautiful girl, but she lacked the ambition to secure a guest, standing quietly listening to something through her headphones, indifferent to what was going on around her. Eun-jo wondered in secret if others saw Na Eun-jo in this same image, a character who possesses no ambition or drive. Suddenly, a man interrupted her thoughts, approaching her and asking why she was standing like this. explaining that manager Jung told him of her desire to come here and therefore sent her herself. That man was Min Won-gil, the CEO of Zeus and the husband of Jung So-hyun, and he warned her that if she continued her slowness, she would end up with a truly eccentric guest. She inquired about the strange guest, so he explained to her that 10 guests remained, and one of them represents a real time bomb, adding that the matter was not his company's concern until last year, but he heard the situation was chaotic. She smiled with light sarcasm, and he commented on her smile, saying that rumors had already spread, and that the other assistants would avoid that person, meaning she was the one who would be forced to deal with him in the end. While he was continuing his talk, reminding her that manager Jong had asked him to watch her, he was interrupted by another man's voice calling him. Suddenly, Min Won-gil appeared confused as he wondered in amazement about the reason for them coming together. Won-gil approached Yoon-jo and called her by her stage name, Navi, ordering her to take charge of serving the man standing on the left, explaining that he is the president of the Yoan Association and the vice president of the Dain Group, advising her to act with humility and perform her duties well. Then he turned to Yang Yi-soo and tasked her with accompanying that old lady, considering that she would be able to deal with her thanks to her calmness and intelligence. Yang Yi-soo asked him with concern if that lady was the bomb that everyone avoids, and Won-gil replied in the affirmative while Yoon-jo was standing beside him. Won-gil confirmed that dealing with her is extremely difficult and added that she recently moved to live in the Trifoil building in Seoul Forest, which piqued Eun-jo's interest intensely. Won-gil sighed in despair and decided there was no point in explaining all the details to her, so he handed her a paper containing the necessary precautions and asked her to memorize them by heart. Yang Yi-soo accepted the task reluctantly, muttering that difficult tasks are always her lot, then turned to Yoon-jo and told her that she owed her a dinner later. Yoon-jo was surprised by her request for a moment, but smiled as she held the paper, pointing out that Yang Yi-soo is the one who would pay for the meal, because she is the one who would take on the arduous task. The scene shifted to reveal the identity of the difficult guest. It is Kim Soo-hee, the former director of the Rowan Cultural Foundation and the head of the Rowan International Group. Kim Soo-hee had dedicated her life to the paintings her only daughter loved after losing her in a tragic accident, as a result of which she suffered from mental illness, and although she was a major patron in the art world, her sharp and volatile mood earned her the title of the worst guest among the assistants. Kim Soo-hee was standing in solemn silence before a painting titled Flowers and Butterflies. She looked with disdain while muttering harsh words, describing the painting as something pitiful. Yoon-jo approached Mrs. Kim Soo-hee and began explaining it, saying that this series was painted by an artist heavily influenced by Impressionism, with a focus on the flow of light. She continued, explaining that the artist made a special effort to depict the changing reflections of light on the water's surface. She added that the blurred lines used by the artist on purpose depict the curved movement of light, giving the painting a dreamy character. She concluded her talk by saying that she personally likes this painting very much, which sparked a look of amazement on Mrs. Kim Soo-hee's face. Mrs. Soo-hee asked her if she knew that this painting was painted when the artist was still a student at university, and Yoon-jo replied in the affirmative. Then she went further in her analysis, pointing out that the soft light expressed in bright pastel colors reflects the happiness the artist was feeling at that time, and that the lines which seem vague are in fact full of power. She added that she believes the way the palette knife was used was better in that period, at least from her point of view. Mrs. Soo-hee was impressed by her analysis, thinking to herself that for a young art student, her analysis is truly impressive. Then, the girl introduced herself politely, saying her name is not Yoon-jo, but Mrs. Soo-hee replied coldly that she was not in need of assistance, perhaps because of the name she heard. Yoon-jo insisted on accompanying her just to see the digital version of the painting in the inner hall, but Mrs. Soo-hee replied that her interest in digitization was even less than her interest in the original painting. Yoon-jo said confidently that, as befits the daughter of the late chairman of CX Soft, Lee Won-gyu, the Flowers and Butterflies painting has been digitally executed with absolute perfection and guaranteed her that she would like it. Kim Soo-hee was the target she had identified from the beginning, a personality she knows well inside and out, and whose emotions she can move easily. She was looking for an influential personality in high society, and in the Bayeryong and Yawan associations, and most importantly, a personality residing in the Trifoil building. The only person who met all these conditions was Kim Soo-hee. At that moment, Mrs. Soo-hee recalled her memories with the artist she cherished. She truly loved the artist Lee Yoon-jo, and despite the large age gap between them, they found many common points that bonded them. Yoon-jo replied to her in her heart, saying, "And I too, madam," and added as a compliment that paintings reflect their owner's personality. and that these paintings suit her perfectly. Mrs. Soo-hee smiled and thanked her for her kind words. Then she asked her if she specialized in art, as she seemed like a critic, and Yoon-jo replied that she was unable to attend university due to financial difficulties, but she loves paintings. When Mrs. Soo-hee asked her if she likes painting them or watching them, Yoon-jo replied that she loves both. Their conversation was interrupted by a man's voice who commented that it was unexpected for Na Yoon-jo to like paintings. Yoon-jo turned to be surprised by the presence of Park Joo-hyun and wondered in confusion about the reason for his presence here. Mrs. Soo-hee addressed him saying he was late, so Joo-hyun offered his apology. Mrs. Gang Soo-hee explained that she had arranged to meet her friend here and asked Yoon-jo to take charge of him for a while. Yoon-jo agreed hesitantly, and Mrs. Soo-hee ordered her to give him one of the remaining microphones. Mrs. Soo-hee excused herself and left. And as Yoon-jo was approaching Joo-hyun to attach the microphone for him, a feeling of irritation took hold of him, realizing that what was happening was more than just a coincidence. And he wondered in confusion about the goal of this woman and why she acts as if she were someone else. After she finished attaching the microphone, Mrs. Soo-hee returned and asked them if they knew each other. Joo-hyun replied that he knows her somewhat. Yoon-jo stepped away from them and told them that she would be nearby within a 20-meter radius if they needed anything. Park Joo-hyun asked Mrs. Soo-hee if she enjoyed viewing the paintings, and she replied that she focused mainly on the works of the artist Lee Yoon-jo, adding that her guide seemed very expert in her works, and perhaps that's due to them sharing the same name. Joo-hyun was casting an inquisitive look at her from afar, while she stood behind them, fully aware that she was the focus of their conversation. Then, Joo-hyun asked Mrs. Soo-hee if she had viewed Lee Yoon-jo's works, and she confirmed that, explaining that Miss Yoon-jo had chosen a few pieces for her that she intended to buy. Mrs. Soo-hee interrupted him, saying she was no longer in need of his recommendations, as she had already obtained some nominations that gained her complete satisfaction, then commented that she sees him as completely attracted, a matter that doesn't look like him at all. Then she revealed to him the true reason for her invitation, explaining that the matter doesn't concern paintings, but rather that she had asked her grandson's wife to choose a suitable young girl for him. Yoon-jo was listening to their conversation through the bugging device, hearing Joo-hyun telling her that he had gone on several arranged dates since his return to Korea, but had not found someone he likes yet. While she was urging him on the necessity of marriage and settling down soon, she walked away thinking to herself that they should have turned off the microphone before engaging in such private talks. She wondered as she continued walking about the reason for this bitter feeling their talk left in her. Although this story no longer meant anything to her, Mrs. Soo-hee interrupted her thoughts by calling her to come for a moment. She asked her to turn this thing off for a second, explaining that she remembered an urgent matter she had to discuss with the president of the Yoan Association. While Yoon-jo was helping her turn off the bugging device attached to the collar of her clothes, she explained to her that to restart it, she only had to push the button upward. Then Mrs. Soo-hee asked her to occupy her friend Joo-hyun in her absence, asserting that she would return immediately. As Mrs. Soo-hee was moving away, Joo-hyun commented, saying it's impressive that she managed to gain the manager's approval, as she is selective and doesn't allow anyone to approach her easily. Then he faced her with a direct question, asking if she was doing all this on purpose. When she inquired about the meaning of his words, he clarified that he was asking if she was hovering around Lee Yoon-jo's memory intentionally. He continued his sharp talk, expressing his disbelief that she even knows Lee Yoon-jo in the first place. He added that her changing her tone of voice, expressions, and behavior to approach the people surrounding her doesn't seem like a good thing at all. She replied to him defiantly, asking if he doesn't even believe she knows Mrs. Lee Yoon-jo. He replied with a mocking question, denouncing any reason that might drive Lee Yoon-jo to care about knowing someone like her. At that, she asked him sharply if he only befriends people if he lacks something. She replied to him saying that she doesn't make friendships this way, then told him that she no longer wishes to accompany him anymore. But he grabbed her wrist firmly as she screamed, asking him to let go of her. So he asked her sarcastically if she had suddenly decided to be treated as a human. Then he reminded her that she was the one who previously asked to be treated as a toy, and that she used to follow him even when he rejected her. He grabbed her chin and asked her to just tell him how she knows her, and he will leave her. She replied that she learned from her, clarifying that she learned painting at the hands of the artist Lee Yoon-jo. She thought to herself that there is no way to prove that, but it is the most logical excuse at the current time. Joo-hyun appeared surprised by her answer, and wondered in amazement if Lee Yoon-jo had taken a student for herself. She asked him if he was convinced now and started to leave, but he stopped her. Then he told her coldly that he understood, and that the person who treats Miss Na Yoon-jo as a human is looking for her, which piqued her surprise. He clarified that manager Kim Soo-hee is requesting Miss Na Eun-jo's presence in the second exhibition hall and that they would go together. Her colleague Yang Yi-soo looked at Eun-jo and commented sarcastically, saying that her acting calmly and obediently doesn't suit her at all and that it's funny seeing her like this. But Eun-jo ordered her to be silent as she followed Park Joo-hyun. Thanks to Joo-hyun not turning off his microphone, Eun-jo was able to eavesdrop on the conversation that took place between him and the president of the Yeohan Association and his sister in real time. The talk was mainly about the Flowers and Butterflies painting series, where they discussed details such as the gallery that would handle the sales agency, who would buy which painting and at what price, and to whom the sale proceeds would go. But what raised her concern was the suspicion that Kang Jin-woo is interfering in these matters. Yang Yi-soo interrupted her thoughts again, commenting on her strange actions today. Eun-jo replied, asking if she expects her to act like a madwoman forever. And Yi-soo replied that she seems to have matured suddenly, and reminded her of the common saying that people die if they change suddenly. Eun-jo replied to herself that she had already died, but Yi-soo advised her to act as Navi as long as she is Navi. Eun-jo wondered if Yi-soo, too, was among this type of person. Young Yi-soo appeared rarely in Na Eun-jo's memories during the past year, meaning she was not deeply involved in her life like Chae Jong-hee and others in the agency. And for this reason, Eun-jo felt relieved when she learned that her partner in this event was Yi-soo. But she warned Yi-soo and ordered her coldly to stop interfering in her affairs unless she was one of Chae Jong-hee's followers, then moved away from her. At exactly 9 in the evening, with the conclusion of the first part of the Festival of Light, the guide's duties also ended, and Eun-jo received an envelope containing her pay. She realized that she didn't even need to check the envelope's content, for manager Kim Soo-hee is known for her excessive generosity with those she loves, and this envelope alone is enough to cover her living expenses for several months. As she was walking in the gallery's corridors, she suddenly stopped when she distinguished a familiar voice and scent of perfume. It was Kim Na-in, who was walking ahead of her in an elegant black dress, asking her friend if the dress didn't suit her perfectly. Eun-jo was shocked and wondered in horror about the reason for Kim Na-in's presence here, as entering this place requires a special invitation. Terror possessed her as she thought how she obtained an invitation that even Kang Jin-woo was unable to get. Then she realized the bitter truth. There was one unused invitation, the one Lee Eun-jo kept in her bedroom vanity drawer. Her own invitation. She wondered in anger if she had searched her room. Not only that, but Kim Na-in was wearing her clothes too, a dress designed by the head designer of Saint Lawyer. From the hairstyle and makeup to the accessories, the handbag and the shoes, there wasn't a single thing that didn't belong to Lee Eun-jo. At that moment, Chae Jong-hee approached Kim Na-in and said that thanks to her good friend, she managed to visit places like these. And Kim Na-in asked her if her husband didn't get an invitation. Chae Jong-hee replied sarcastically about the use of having so much money if he can't even get an invitation to places like these. Eun-jo was shocked as she realized a relationship existed between them, a matter she had never imagined. Jong-hee said that this place cannot be entered just by owning money, to which Na-in replied, saying, "Exactly." Then Jong-hee caught a glimpse of Eun-jo standing nearby. Jong-hee looked at her with disdain as she urged her friend that they hurry and go. The two ladies continued their walking, and Na-in commented that the party had already started. Eun-jo stood trying to gather her scattered self, asserting that there is nothing she can do just because she faced Kim Na-in. She cannot tear the invitation from her hand, and she cannot strip off the clothes she is wearing. While she was immersed in her thoughts, she heard another familiar voice, where Jong-hee was welcoming CEO Park Joo-hyun. Jong-hee stepped toward Joo-hyun and introduced herself to him, reminding him that they met at the Hera agency party. Joo-hyun intended to leave, but Jong-hee stopped him and asked Na-in to step forward to greet the CEO of MK Investment. Park Joo-hyun immediately recognized Kim Na-in, who was introduced to him, remembering that she was the lady associated with the vice chairman of CX Soft, Kang Jin-woo. Kim Na-in asked him in surprise if he knew her, and Joo-hyun replied that he had already seen her at the funeral hall and during the cremation of Lee Eun-jo's body. Then he added that he noticed she was crying a lot at that time, and asked her in a direct style if she was from Vice President Kang Jin-woo's side or from Lee Eun-jo's side, making her hesitate in the answer. but she soon gathered herself and claimed that she was, of course, from Yoonjo Uni's side, claiming she was her close friend who was younger than her. Joo-hyun was not convinced by her answer, so he asked her if she was really from Lee Yoon-jo's side. Na-in exaggerated in describing their relationship, claiming they were inseparable as twins, and that for Unjo Uni, she was everything she possessed in this world. Joo-hyun thought of her talk sarcastically, then asked her how they could be close to this extent as to share a non-transferable special invitation. Na-in was confused and tried to justify the situation, claiming the invitation was a gift from Unjo Uni, and that she could attend anyway as part of the Yoan Association staff. Then she feigned crying and added that Unjo had promised her they would come together, but fate prevented that, prompting Chae Jong-hee to ask her with feigned concern if she was okay. In a fleeting moment, Joo-hyun snatched the invitation from her hand and asked her coldly if this was Lee Yoon-jo's invitation. She confirmed that to him while still feigning collapse and asked him about the reason for his interest in the matter, while the real Yoon-jo was watching the situation from afar in silence. Joo-hyun turned and made a phone call, asking the other party to confirm something in his capacity. As the chairman of the board, he asked seriously about who was supposed to attend with the writer Lee Yoon-jo, if she were alive, pointing out that the partners list had already been submitted. The answer came to him via phone that the writer Lee Yoon-jo had informed them she would attend alone without any partner. The speaker continued explaining that she was not the type to bring anyone to such events, so much so that she hadn't brought her husband before. Joo-hyun concluded his first inquiry, then posed another question, making sure that even with the invitation, no one can enter unless their name is on the list. The speaker confirmed to him that this was Yoon-jo's own idea, as individual codes were assigned to each invitation, and even invited guests are not allowed entry if they are not accompanied by the person invited in their name. Joo-hyun thought that this is an excellent way to prevent intruders from entering. Then the speaker asked him if there was any problem. He replied in the negative and told him he would call him again tomorrow, then ended the call, while Chae Jong-hee was asking Na-in with concern about what was happening. Joo-hyun faced Na-in coldly, saying that although she's wearing Lee Yoon-jo's clothes and imitating her style, she can never become her. Na-in screamed in his face in confusion that this dress belongs to her, but he replied coldly that he doubts that. With a mocking smile, he told her that he would confiscate this invitation from her, then took it and left the place. The duo Kim Na-in and Chae Jong-hee stood in a state of shock, unable to speak. On his way back to his car, Joo-hyun was thinking of Kim Na-in, and the more he thought of her, his feeling of disgust toward her increased. He wondered sarcastically about her lie regarding being inseparable as twins, and thought she suits Kang Jin-woo much more. He was completely certain it was impossible for that woman to be among Eun-jo's close friends, not her at least. But his thoughts soon turned to Na Eun-jo, whom he saw today, who appeared completely different, and he realized she is the real problem occupying his mind. He thought that usually he wouldn't have cared at all about someone like her, for regardless of her name, she possessed nothing that piqued his interest. But he now became skeptical of her claim that she was Lee Yoon-jo's student, and decided he would confirm the truth of this matter himself. Meanwhile, Eun-jo was sitting at a bus station, wondering in confusion how Joo-hyun knew that dress belonged to her. She sat on a bench at the bus station, immersed in her thoughts, and remembered how Park Joo-hyun used to care about her in the past. But she realized that's no longer possible now, for 8 whole years had passed since their separation. She gripped her knee firmly, wondering in bitterness if all he shows now is just a grudge, because he still sees her as Lee Won-gyu's daughter. But she soon brushed those thoughts from her head and decided it's time to turn the page of the past and forget everything. Her plan was clear. She was expecting manager Kim Soo-hee to call her soon, after she succeeded in convincing her of the poor girl's story who couldn't attend university, which would likely drive the manager to urge her to study. But the most important reason that would make the manager search for her, as she believed, was her complete confidence that the value of the paintings she recommended would double, for her expert eye in art had never failed her. She realized that if manager Soo-hee valued Na Eun-jo's judgment on artistic works, she would seek her again, which would pave the way for her and make it easier to approach the Trifoil building through manager Kim Soo-hee. She would be able to access the Byeryongwi and Yeonwi associations and thus get closer to her enemy Kang Jin-woo. Although she knew this matter would take time, it was the best way she possessed at the current time. And while she was immersed in planning, a black car suddenly stopped beside her. The driver was Park Joo-hyun, and she was surprised to see him again. Anxiety possessed her as she wondered about the reason for his reappearance and whether he came here to hurt her again. He offered to drive her, but she rejected his offer, asserting she would take the bus. but he stopped his car in front of the arriving bus to prevent it from moving, then insisted she get into the car and not block traffic, sparking her anger, for she wasn't the one blocking the road, but he was. Faced with his persistence and his threat that he wouldn't move the car unless she got in, she found no other choice, but he asked her to get in with a more tender tone, which made her eventually surrender and get into the car. She thought to herself that she wouldn't have done that if he hadn't uttered her name, Yoonjo please, in her memory, for that was her weakness. Once the car started, he asked her if she still lived in Gyeongsu-dong, and she replied she was going to an art supply store. He asked skeptically if she was really going to paint. She replied sharply that she got into the car as he wanted, and asked him to drive in silence. While he was driving, Joo-hyun recalled his memories with the real Na Eun-jo, and how he used to chase her away with hurtful words and ignore her coldly, but she used to cling to him desperately, reaching a limit of submissiveness. Her sudden change of behavior was a strange thing for him. He was certain people don't change in this sudden way, meaning her current personality is likely just a mask. She interrupted him, repeating her request that he drive in silence as long as she responded to his wish. He thought for a moment, then decided to test her, wondering if they should do that today. Then he reminded her of her previous promise that she would respond to him whenever he called her, and proposed coldly they go to a hotel, just as they did on that night. But she answered him firmly she had already told him to forget that matter, and she wouldn't do that with him again. She added she doesn't possess any interest in a physical relationship devoid of love, but he asked her how she says there is no love, claiming he enjoyed every moment on that night with all his heart. But she replied that heart was not directed at her, but rather was for Lee Yoon-jo. She faced him with the truth that he doesn't love her, but likely hates her, and that she's definitely not the type he prefers, which he couldn't deny. Then, Joo-hyun realized a shocking truth. Na Eun-jo knew. She knew he only reacts to the name Eun-jo, meaning she realized from the start she was just a substitute. Park Joo-hyun faced her sharply, wondering if she realized she's practicing a very strange trick at this moment. She asked him in amazement about which trick he's talking, so he revealed his suspicions to her, accusing her that she approached him from the start knowing perfectly well that Lee Yoon-jo is the owner of the name he's obsessed with. She denied that in confusion, claiming she didn't know, and that if she had known, she would have avoided him completely as she's doing now. Joo-hyun thought of her talk and saw it's not entirely far-fetched. The Na Eun-jo, he knew, clung to him even when he told her of his hate for her, but she's now avoiding him. And this change didn't start until after Lee Eun-jo's death. He continued his pressure on her, wondering about the reason for this sudden hostile stance, and had she decided now to truly turn into Lee Yoon-jo, then asked her sarcastically if she thought that possible. He followed his talk, saying he would, for the sake of argument, assume she was indeed Lee Yoon-jo's student, and they knew each other, and she kept her beside her to teach her. Then he demanded defiantly she prove that, to convince him what she says is not a lie. Yoon-jo told him the teacher. Lee Yoon-jo strongly refused taking any students, but she managed to invent a convincing story, which is that the teacher had supervised her out of pity for her condition and her desire to help her survive through teaching her painting. Then she answered him smartly, pointing out that in the end he was also her student, which surprised him, for he was fully aware he never mentioned to her that Yoon-jo had taught him art. She replied confidently she possesses at least this much intuition, even though he never told her that. Joo-hyun commented to himself that the matter is entirely unexpected, for he didn't think Na Eun-jo possessed such discernment. Eun-jo was possessed by a feeling of annoyance. This is specifically the reason she didn't want to get involved with Joo-hyun, for her own feelings and Na Eun-jo's memories had become in a state of tangled chaos, and whenever they met, it would only lead to hurting each of them to the other. So she decided to cut him from her life and faced him with her question if she was truly obliged to prove to him her relationship with the teacher, Lee Yoon-jo. Then she told him that if he couldn't believe her, there was no need for that, for the matter makes no difference to her. After a moment of silence, the car started. To surprise her with a direct question about how long she knew Yoon-jo, she wondered in concern what he's trying to discover, and should she tell him the real period she knew him in, 8 years? Or perhaps longer than that. She realized the danger. Joo-hyun was once the person who knew her more than anyone else, and he would notice immediately any gap in her talk. For by her nature, she didn't used to befriend anyone in a short time, but for there to be a long relationship, there must be evidence of Na Eun-jo's presence in her life, which didn't exist. So with all caution, she told him she started learning from her 3 years ago, but they didn't get close to each other until about a year ago, and she used to learn in the teacher's studio whenever she had the chance. Then emphasized again she isn't obliged to explain all this to him. Then she added she's now after knowing that the Yoon-jo he means is her teacher, Lee Yoon-jo. She won't bother him as she used to in the past, and she expressed her hope that they won't have to go through this embarrassing and unpleasant situation again. He was silent for moments, then stopped with the car at a nearby station and ordered her to get down. She thanked him and stepped out of the car and felt pain, but she was happy that the matter ended in this way and resolved she wouldn't look behind her ever. But he suddenly called her name, Na-eun-jo. She continued her walking, repeating to herself not to look back. No more. But he asked her to call him, which struck her with amazement. After she told him the situation is unpleasant and she doesn't want to see him again, he asks her to call him. She replied that won't happen and that she already deleted his number. He smiled with confidence, telling her she'll call him in the end, for her to move away, thinking sarcastically, as if she would really do that. She closed her eyes in pain, scolding herself in secret, describing Lee Yoon-jo as a fool. Elsewhere, Kim Na-in was standing in a parking lot fuming with anger, wondering how that girl dared to insult her in this way, and considering it absurd to think beauty is everything. She screamed in anger, wondering why she must be treated in this way, and threw all the blame on the stupid Lee Yoon-jo and the appa who was with her. While Kim Na-in was muttering in anger, waiting for the elevator, a security guard interrupted her, asking about her destination. She replied sharply, inquiring about his request, so he asked her coldly about the unit she intends. Her sharpness increased as she asked him in denunciation if he doesn't know who she is. He answered her politely. He doesn't know her, prompting her to scream in his face, repeating her question in anger. He asked her if she's a resident of the building and in which unit she lives, for her to wonder to herself sarcastically if security is supposed to memorize the faces of all residents. She answered him arrogantly that she resides here, in penthouse unit, number 4601. The guard was surprised by her answer and told her that this unit is the home of the artist Lee Yoon-jo, making Na-in lose her mind. She screamed in herself Lee Yoon-jo's name over and over, expressing her intense tiredness of her, as if she were on the verge of madness. The guard tried to calm her and asked her to provide him with her name and phone number if she were a visitor to Unit 4601, but she slapped him hard, piquing his amazement. She screamed in his face, warning him against calling her a visitor again, and ordered him to remember this well. Then she announced in a loud voice that the lady of this house is not Lee Yoon-jo, but she, Kim Na-in. The scene shifted to an earlier time inside the apartment, where Kang Jin-woo was asking Kim Na-in if she doesn't feel awe from touching a dead woman's belongings, and she replied sarcastically that Yoon-jo's father, if he were present, would have stopped her long ago. Then she wondered coldly if he would stand idly and watch his daughter being killed, then asked him to stop this talk and get ready for them to go together. Jin-woo rejected her request, saying the matter doesn't seem appropriate. Na-in wondered about the reason for his refusal, so he reminded her of the short period since Yoon-jo's death and that she wants to go to a party, emphasizing the necessity that he maintains his calm at the current time to avoid suspicions. Returned to the present, where she started crying, calling him Appa. When she returned to the apartment, Jin-woo asked her about the reason for her crying after she told him she was going to the party. She threw the blame on him, claiming everything happening is because he refuses to marry her, but he tried to calm her, reminding her they talked about this matter before, and that marriage is still an early matter. She screamed in his face she knows he can't marry this fast after his wife's death, but she expected him at least to pretend the desire for that, and to promise her marriage in the next year or in spring. She announced in anger she would sleep alone tonight, sparking his surprise. She ignored him, and he thought to himself that this is his loss, especially since he had eaten eel for this night. Then he commented sarcastically that the night is long, and women are many. Meanwhile, Eun-jo was sitting in her room, looking at the bonus she received from the Festival of Light, and remembered that in her room in trifoil, there was also a bundle of Yeowon Association envelopes in her desk drawer. Anger possessed her, thinking how Kim Na-in was entering and leaving her room and using her belongings as she pleases, describing the matter as absurd. She remembered how Kim Na-in always coveted her possessions whenever she saw them, especially on one occasion when she was organizing some shoes she no longer wore to donate them in a charity bazaar. On that day, Na-in asked her how she could give up something of this beauty, and Eun-jo replied that if it were beautiful and suited her, she could take them. Na-in tried the shoe and commented it suits her somewhat, and adds sarcastically it would suit her perfectly if she cut a part of her toe, and asked her if she wished to undergo surgery. Those words said as a joke were a shiver. Eun-jo thought now that Na-in might surround herself with her belongings and scream with joy, but she made up her mind and decided she would go to her herself, then stopped suddenly while looking at something with amazement, wondering in terror, what is this? At the headquarters of MK Investment, an employee informed her team leader that that girl had come again. wondering what they should do. Kim Gyu answered her sharply, denouncing her question and emphasizing that they simply had to execute the CEO's orders. Meanwhile, the secretary, Jung Eun-ji, was answering the phone, explaining to the caller that the CEO's work was not yet finished and asking her to call back in an hour. While Kim Gyu sighed in the background, Secretary Kim Gyu entered Park Ju-hyun's office and told him that this was already the 7th call from Ms. Lee Eun-jo, as she'd been calling once every hour since 9 in the morning. Ju-hyun asked him coldly, "So what?" prompting Kim Gyu to urge him to stop playing with people and answer the phone, or at least make up an excuse like a business trip to postpone the call for a few days. Then Kim Gyu asked him sarcastically if he was now trying to play hard to get with Lee Eun-jo. Ju-hyun asked him who said he wasn't, which surprised Kim Gyu. Ju-hyun continued his provocative talk, wondering if he didn't have the right to play hard to get with a woman he allowed into his bed. Kim Gyu reminded him of his previous words, where he said she wasn't the real Lee Eun-jo, and that he was only having fun with her because of the similarity in names. Kim Gyu pretended to be convinced and added that Lee Eun-jo was not on his level anyway, but he offered to introduce him to other women better than her, only to be surprised by Eun-jo herself standing at the door. Eun-jo asked coldly if the CEO was inside, which caused Kim Gyu extreme confusion. Eun-jo entered the office, leaving Kim Gyu wondering in astonishment at the appearance of Lee Eun-jo. She placed a card on his table and asked him sharply if he was playing with her now. Ju-hyun called his secretary, Kim Gyu, who answered in confusion. Ju-hyun scolded him coldly, wondering if this was the level of security in their company and if this was a place where unannounced visitors could break in so easily. Kim Gyu tried to apologize, confirming that the security team would be. Eun-jo interrupted him with a laugh, saying she was thinking the same thing and that they needed retraining. Ju-hyun explained that he understood how she was able to enter easily just by showing his business card and claiming to have an appointment, and that he thought she had disposed of the card after all those frantic calls to the office. Eun-jo replied that she did not want to call him personally and had no desire to save his number in her phone either. Ju-hyun commented with a sarcastic smile that she still didn't know that forcing her to call him was easier than putting a business card in an envelope. Then he asked her about the purpose of her visit, and she told him it was already over, pointing to the envelope she had placed on the table, confirming that she was returning it exactly as she had received it. Ju-hyun called his secretary again and ordered him to bring 2 cups of tea and then leave. Eun-jo told him she didn't need tea and was about to leave, but he ordered her to sit down. Then he added that it was better not to embarrass each other in front of the employees and ordered her to sit down again, so she complied. Participants in the Festival of Light could provide sponsorship money to assistants ranging from 0 to 10 million won. Naturally, manager Kim So-hee, who accepts nothing but the best, put the maximum amount in the envelope and also attached a guide for the Luang Cultural Foundation's scholarship program, expressing her desire for Eun-jo to continue her art studies. But Park Ju-hyun broke the festival rules with his unprecedented act. He asked her sarcastically if the amount was too small. She answered yes, it was too small, and that she expected him to put about 1 billion won, befitting the name of MK, and wondered if he was joking with her by putting only 100 million won. Park Ju-hyun met her challenge with a sarcastic smile and commented coldly that 100 million won was not a large amount, wondering if she was joking with him, and adding that he had seen people receiving smaller amounts yet showing great gratitude. But she faced his sarcasm with firmness and steadfastness, confirming that she had already told him she would not engage in such deals again. Her refusal piqued his interest, so he repeated her words mockingly, then asked her directly if she was trying to raise her price and increase the value of the deal. While she stared at him in confusion, he continued his challenge, wondering if he should give her the 1 billion won she mentioned earlier, since she considered the 100 million a small amount. Then he completed his question coldly, to see if she would accept his offer then. Anger took hold of her at his manner, and she asked him sharply what he exactly meant, then addressed him by his name, Park Ju-hyun, but he interrupted her with icy calmness and addressed her as Miss Lee Eun-jo, explaining that she was misunderstanding the matter and that the 100 million won was not compensation for spending a night together. When she inquired about the meaning of his words, he answered her with a veiled insult, saying that given her reputation, he thought he was acting generously with her, and nothing more. Then he stood up to reveal his true intention, announcing that what he really wanted to buy was her time. He made a direct offer, asking her to sell him her time, explaining that the amount of 1 billion won was not impossible, but they would start with a contract worth 100 million won for 1 month. She looked at him with disapproval, calling him crazy and wondering why she would do such a thing, then told him she had already returned the money and was about to leave. Before turning around, she threw her last words at him, expressing her hope that they would never meet again. Yoonjo left the office, leaving Park Joo-hyun to sit with his assistant Kim Gyu, who described Joo-hyun's behavior as absolute madness. Joo-hyun asked him if what he did was truly crazy, and his assistant confirmed it completely. This prompted Kim Gyu to ask him directly what was happening with him and whether he had developed real feelings for Lee Yoonjo. Joo-hyun replied that it depended on the type of feelings, but he admitted that he indeed had some feelings for her. Kim Gyu became even more confused, thinking that the great Park Joo-hyun would not waste his money this way on a poor model, and wondered about the reason for this financial game. Joo-hyun thought that the Lee Yoonjo he knew in the past would have accepted 100 million won as a reward and thanked him for it, but the Yoonjo he met at the exhibition was completely different. For this reason, he decided to test her reaction to see whether she would return this amount or not. Then Kim Gyu asked him if this whole matter was about Ms. Lee Eunjo. Joo-hyun smiled briefly, praising his secretary's intelligence, which prompted Kim Gyu to ask him what connected Na Eunjo and Lee Yoonjo. Joo-hyun dropped the news he had reached, which was that Na Eunjo was a student of Lee Yoonjo. Kim Gyu was completely shocked by this information, while Joo-hyun was drinking his glass quietly. Joo-hyun thought to himself bitterly, "She is the woman who took my place," referring to the fact that Na Eunjo had become a student of Lee Yoonjo after his departure. Meanwhile, Yoonjo was in her apartment, and the Navi system displayed disturbing information. What she needed most now was money. The system explained to her that the Seongsu-dong studio contract would be canceled if the rent was not paid, and Kang Jin-woo would be contacted, while the Apgujeong-dong studio would become his property once the inheritance procedures were completed. But the artworks inside were registered in the company's name, so Kang Jin-woo could not own them. The real problem lay in the Seongsu-dong studio. Yoonjo remembered that she had created that place secretly because she knew that Kang Jin-woo was investigating her properties, which meant that ownership of the paintings there might be fully transferred to him. It was something she decided she would never allow to happen. So she asked Navi to show her the list of assets that Kang Jin-woo would inherit. Multiple screens appeared before her showing CX Soft company shares, its real estate including the Truffle building in addition to its financial assets. Yoonjo remembered that she was unable to notarize the will she wrote a few years ago, and that was the only way she could protect her property from Kang Jin-woo's greed. With determination, she addressed her assistant system, announcing that she was about to commit a bad deed and asked if it would provide her with the help she needed. Elsewhere, 16 days after the death of Lee Yoonjo, Kang Jin-woo was standing in his luxury apartment talking to his secretary. Jin-woo explained that despite the advice he received to stay out of the spotlight until the 49th day memorial of her death, he couldn't wait that long, as he desperately needed to control and restructure CX Soft as soon as possible. He justified this haste by saying he had invested 3 years of effort in this matter and that he couldn't slow down now because of Yoonjo's death. His secretary agreed, considering what he said was the height of wisdom. Then Jin-woo asked him about Kim Na-in, inquiring if she was still as angry. The secretary confirmed that she seemed very angry, prompting Jin-woo to comment coldly that she should stop this childish behavior because it would become annoying if it continued this way. Then he handed his secretary a credit card and ordered him to ask Na-in to go shopping to calm her nerves, but warned him not to tell her that there were limits to satisfying her this way. He also ordered him to buy himself a new suit with that card. As his companion, he must maintain a proper appearance. Before the secretary left, Jin-woo emphasized the necessity of managing Na-in well, explaining that today was an important day where all members would gather, and that he didn't want her to call him for any reason. Meanwhile, Yoonjo was standing in the street talking to Navi, who told her that what she was doing now was considered the crime of forging private documents. She wondered in disapproval why, as she was just trying to solve her problem herself, so how could that be a crime? Navi explained to her that legally Ms. Lee Yoonjo is Na Yoonjo at the moment. Yoonjo realized that she knew what she was doing went beyond being illegal. It was a full-fledged crime, as Na Yoonjo was imitating Lee Yoonjo's handwriting to write a letter she would present to her lawyer. But she wondered to herself who would discover the matter when the handwriting was perfectly identical. What she needed now was to apply for a precautionary measure to invalidate the inheritance, as she was determined not to let Kang Jin-woo take even a single coin from her, let alone the paintings. Navi advised her at such times not to do dangerous things alone, but to seek the help of someone she trusts. So she answered that she knew that, and that was why she came here. She was standing in front of the law firm represented by the lawyer who drafted the initial version of her will. He had been her friend for 14 years, and the most trustworthy person after Secretary Joe. But as soon as she entered, she was hit by a violent Shock, for Kang Jin-woo was standing there talking to her lawyer, Do Woo-jong. The lawyer greeted Kang Jin-woo with a sarcastic smile, wondering if he should call him vice president or president now. Jin-woo replied mockingly that there were many eyes watching and there was no need for such formalities. Then the lawyer added that Jin-woo should be more confident now, for after Yoonjo's departure, he had become the sole heir to CX Company. She was struck by amazement as she listened to their conversation and wondered in shock how Do Woo-jong could say something like that and how they knew each other. Navi immediately showed her information stating that Do Woo-jong and Kang Jin-woo got to know each other through Kim Min-soo. Yoonjo shook as she understood that Vice President Kang Jin-woo was the sole heir to CX Company and called out to Navi in despair. Kang Jin-woo noticed her condition, approached her and asked if she was okay, noting that her features looked very pale and suggested she go to the lounge, but she screamed in his face, asking him to leave her alone. Kang Jin-woo asked with fake concern if she was okay, but she froze in place, for his familiar voice and nostalgic scent were enough to bring her back to her worst nightmares. Joo-yeon grabbed her from behind as he supported her, and she turned to find him in front of her. Astonishment took hold of Kang Jin-woo as he wondered in shock why Park Joo-yeon was in this place. At that moment, Joo-yeon was embracing Yoonjo, who seemed on the verge of collapse, and asked her with concern if she was okay. Kang Jin-woo heard the name Yoonjo, which sparked his confusion. How could this woman be Yoonjo? His memory went back to the real Lee Yoonjo and how she introduced herself to him at their first meeting. He tried to convince himself that it was just a coincidence in names and that what was happening was just a fluke. When the lawyer, Do Woo-jong, asked about that lady's identity, Joo-yeon replied that she was just one of his acquaintances. Then he carried her in his arms and left the place. The lawyer stopped him and asked if he was busy, but Joo-yeon interrupted him coldly, emphasizing that he had no time for him now. Then he added that as he could see, his girlfriend had collapsed, so he would return another time. Kang Jin-woo watched him as he left, wondering in resentment about this situation, and the lawyer commented sarcastically on Joo-yeon's annoying personality that combines attractive appearance, wealth, extraordinary intelligence, and superior ability. Kang Jin-woo agreed, and the lawyer added sarcastically that Joo-yeon seemed as if God had loved him alone and threw all possible choices at one person. Kang Jin-woo replied, saying that God was always unfair, and that is why he created this unfair world. But the lawyer added another piece of information, which was that Park Joo-yeon had a miserable childhood, and perhaps that is why he lacks some humanity. He lived alone with his father, who eventually committed suicide. The lawyer explained that Joo-yeon's father was a genius programmer, and that he had inherited this brilliant mind from him. But Kang Jin-woo wondered why he became the CEO of an investment company instead of becoming a programmer. The lawyer answered that if CX Company had a talent like Joo-yeon, the late chairman Lee Won-gyu would not have had to oppose the wishes of the board members and express his opposition. Kang Jin-woo interrupted his talk, warning him that he was a careless person and wondering how he could say such things in a lobby full of people. The lawyer immediately apologized, but Kang Jin-woo asked him if he knew anything else about Park Joo-yeon, and the lawyer told him that Joo-yeon and Yoonjo were very close. This raised Jin-woo's suspicions, so he wondered if their relationship went beyond just being teacher and student, but the lawyer asked him to continue his talk. Meanwhile, Yoonjo was waking up on the sofa, awakened by Navi, who told her it was 7 in the evening. She woke up in a state of panic, wondering where she was, for in the morning she was at the law firm. Navi told her she was at CEO Park Joo-yeon's house, which shocked her, so she wondered how and why she was here. Navi explained to her that Joo-yeon had moved her here after she collapsed. Then Yoonjo thought if she could talk to Navi without speaking aloud. Suddenly, she heard Joo-yeon's voice asking her sharply how they could talk if she wasn't speaking, which stunned her. He stepped toward her and asked her to wake up, for he believed they had to talk. She stood up apologizing, claiming she had felt dizzy earlier. But Joo-yeon interrupted her as he held out an envelope, asking what this was, making Yoonjo realize it was the letter she had written. She tried to take it from him, but he held it out of her reach and demanded an explanation, wondering why this letter was in the hands of Na Eunjo. He grabbed her hand firmly and repeated his question sharply. Why was Yoonjo's letter in her hands? Yoonjo found no escape, so she answered him that her teacher was the one who gave it to her. Joo-yeon began to read the letter in which Lee Yoonjo asked Navi for a favor, which was that if anything happened to her or if she died suddenly, she should suspect that man. Kang Jin-woo, Lee Yoonjo, emphasized to Navi that she would not give in to death before uncovering the truth about her father's death. She advised her not to try to do that alone and asked her to seek help and go to the lawyer Do Woo-jong, representative of Hansel Law Firm, and ask him for help in her name. At the end of the letter, Lee Yoonjo wrote that she trusts her And most importantly, she must be careful of her husband, Kang Jin-woo. While Park Joo-hyun was examining the letter, he thought that it was impossible for him not to recognize Yoonjo's handwriting, for he was absolutely sure it was hers. Also, the distinctive signature resembling a butterfly was conclusive evidence that it was indeed Lee Yoonjo. After he confirmed the letter's authenticity, he asked Yoonjo why she possessed such a thing. She answered him that she had already told him that this was a letter her teacher had left for her, but he continued to press her, wondering why Yoonjo left such a letter for her specifically. Joo-hyun remembered his talk with his secretary and how he didn't believe her claim that she was Lee Yoonjo's student at first because no matter how much he searched, he found no connection linking them. But Yoonjo faced him sharply, noting that he apparently wouldn't have believed anything she said anyway, then asked him to return the letter and stop caring about the matter. He answered her that it wasn't that he didn't believe her, but he couldn't believe it, then announced that he would keep the letter. Yoonjo was shocked by his decision and asked him what he said, only for him to confront her with another question, wondering if she was planning to take this letter and go to Dowoojong again. He added that he understood why Lee Yoonjo pointed to Dowoojong, but this was a mistake, especially after what he saw from him earlier. Yoonjo clenched her hands, thinking that she had eyes too and that she knew what he saw, while Joo-hyun thought that if what he believed was true, then this letter would cause a great stir. He warned her that if she interfered in this matter recklessly, she might put herself in danger. Then she asked him if she could trust him. Not only not to betray her, but not to betray her teacher, Lee Yoonjo. He answered her sarcastically, wondering if she thought that if he was going to betray Lee Yoonjo, he wouldn't have left her 8 years ago. He added that he wouldn't have wandered for the past 8 years if he intended to betray her, which prompted her to make her decision, and she told him she would trust him and leave the letter with him for a few days. That night, Yoonjo was lying in her bed suffering from a severe headache, and she remembered that Navi had told her that this was one of the side effects of the soul stabilizing in Yoonjo's body. She addressed Navi in her heart and asked him if he knew why her father gave him this name. Her memory went back to the past and revealed that the reason was that her mother's name was Nabyong, and that during her high school period, a thief broke into their home and stabbed her mother. She remembered how she embraced her mother and kept crying until the ambulance arrived. In her final moments, her mother asked her to listen to her carefully and recommended she go to a social care center called Mistress in Hyewadong, a place she was running, and asked her to take care of it. It was a will befitting Nabyong, who was nicknamed the Korean Mother Teresa, and although her father had much to say to his daughter who witnessed her mother's death, he didn't. After her mother's death, her father immersed himself in chatbot system research, while she immersed herself in painting. Both of them needed a Navi of their own. In his office, Park Joo-hyun was thinking about Na Yoonjo, and this complex feeling that combined satisfaction and annoyance at her sharing Lee Yoonjo's name. But he realized that it was not so, for he was not reacting to the name but to Lee Yoonjo herself, with everything related to her. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone. The caller was manager Kim So-hee from Ruin Foundation. He answered the phone, and the manager asked him if he knew about the relationship between Ms. Anna Yoonjo and the artist Lee Yoonjo, then began to tell him what she knew about her. She was talking about the check she gave to Yoonjo, and how she wondered if a young girl might spend all this amount on luxuries, and whether she was planning not to look back again. But she revealed a surprise to him, which was that the check had been used at the Midas Social Care Center in Hyewadong. Manager Kim So-hee told him that she knew this place too, as it was a care center founded by the artist Lee Yoonjo's mother and provided assistance to the elderly living alone, orphans, and residents of poor neighborhoods. She added that artist Lee Yoonjo used to send 10 million won every month, but it seemed nothing arrived this month, and Vice President Kang Jin-woo did not take over the matter. Rather, it seemed that young lady was the one who did it instead of him. Then she told CEO Park that she had already told him she was a respectable young woman. She concluded that she must have been very close to the artist Lee Yoonjo. Otherwise, who would do such a thing? She noticed that Park was not answering her and asked if he was listening, but he soon ended the call with her, promising her that he would call her back later. Meanwhile, Yoonjo was thinking that she had donated all the money she received from the manager to the care center, and after paying the rent and maintenance fees, she had only about 600,000 won left. She felt relieved because work had come at a time when she desperately needed money, and she had even started getting used to riding the bus alone now. She wondered if she was slowly getting used to Yoonjo's life. While she was on the bus, she felt a hand touching her, so she asked its owner to remove his hand, threatening him with breaking his fingers if he didn't. The young man asked her in disapproval about the reason for all this fuss over a simple touch, but she faced him firmly, explaining that touching someone deliberately is sexual harassment and that people like him are called perverts. Then she took out her phone to record what was happening as evidence, which sparked the anger of the young man who described her as insolent, wondering how she dared to describe him as a pervert after he touched what was supposed to be touched. She replied to him that touching what should not be touched makes him a pervert, and that she never gave him permission to touch her body. But the young man persisted in his insolence, saying it was natural to want to touch her when she looked this sexy. Disgust took hold of her, and she wondered what kind of madman this was, and he shouted in her face. He accused her of being the one who seduces men first by dyeing her hair and showing her charms, prompting her to shout in his face. She faced him saying her luck was indeed bad this morning, but if she let him pass, he would continue to live this way. And when he asked if she would report him, she noticed he was preparing for the teacher certification exam, so she told him she didn't want an insignificant person like him to become a teacher. For teachers face hiring restrictions, don't they? Then she challenged him to sue her, as she would sue him too. She left the bus thinking what a terrible start to the day, but this situation made her start to understand why Na Eunjo possessed such a tough personality. Her methods were harsh, but she was struggling to protect herself. She resolved to work, for if that scoundrel sued her, she would have to pay a fine, and she still had to pay the studio rent. When she arrived at Hera Agency, CEO Jung Soyeon summoned her to her office. Soyeon asked her if she was taking medicine these days, and Yoonjo muttered to herself, "Not this again." Then Soyeon added how a person could change this much and that she seemed in good condition recently. Soyeon continued her praise, saying she looked like a completely normal person, so Yoonjo asked her if that was a compliment. And Soyeon answered in the affirmative and urged her to continue this way. Then she moved to work and told her she had 3 jobs. The first of which was to be a promotional model for Ruin Cultural Foundation, which was mandatory because the manager had requested her personally. Yoonjo smiled to herself, for as she expected, the manager had made her move. The second offer was a role in Chae Jong-hee's new film, but Yoonjo rejected it immediately. Finally, there was a request from CEO Min to attend a party at a club called Year, where they were looking for beautiful and elegant girls. Yoonjo thought that the Year Club was unbelievable news and that Kang Jin-woo was a member of it too. Soyeon commented that this matter would normally be none of her business, but recently her appearance was no longer her only strength. Soyeon continued her talk, asking Yoonjo which offer she would choose among the 3. She explained that the first offer regarding the Ruin Foundation was mandatory, and she personally wanted her to accept the second offer regarding the film, while the third offer to attend the party was a specific request from CEO Min himself. Yoonjo answered decisively that she would do everything except the second offer. Soyeon was surprised by her refusal, noting that it was a rare opportunity that models scramble for to enter the world of acting these days, but Yoonjo insisted on her position, emphasizing that her answer had not changed. Yoonjo explained the reason for her flat refusal, stating that if she participated in that film, Chae Jong-hee would destroy her again, and she didn't want that to be repeated. Soyeon gave in to her decision and told her she would arrange the Ruin Foundation's schedule first. Then she handed her a file containing details of the party to be held on Friday at the Cloud Hotel and asked her to study the guest list and conversation topics, in addition to coordinating with the design team regarding her look, so Yoonjo thanked her and took the file. As Yoonjo was about to leave, Chae Jong-hee blocked her path, called out to the CEO, then demanded in a condescending tone that Yoonjo greet her. Yoonjo returned the greeting coldly, then turned to leave, leaving Jong-hee muttering angrily about that arrogant bitch and how she dared to ignore her after she wasn't even able to look her in the eye. Soyeon interrupted her anger, asking Chae Jong-hee to stop targeting Navi. Jong-hee exploded in anger, accusing Navi of messing with Yoonwoo. Soyeon defended Navi, explaining that Yoonwoo was the one chasing her and that CCTV cameras proved it. But Jong-hee continued her attack, describing Navi as famous for seducing men, and that if she stayed still, she would be wagging her tail at him, prompting Soyeon to reply sharply that this talk applied to her, and asked her to focus on her condition before filming instead of creating problems. Jong-hee accused the CEO of giving Navi work, wondering with concern if it was in her film. Soyeon denied that, explaining that the matter was limited to a promotional offer and assistance at the party, which sparked the madness of Jong-hee, who shouted in Soyeon's face, calling her crazy, and threatened to cancel the filming of the entire movie if Navi's mission was not canceled immediately. Meanwhile, Yoonjo sat examining the party guest list, only to be surprised by the presence of Kang Jin-woo's name among the attendees. She concluded that if he was going to appear in such a gathering less than a month after his wife's death, then this meeting must be of great importance and might be an opportunity for her to get valuable information. She turned the page with curiosity, wondering about the rest of the names on the list. She was stunned when her eyes fell on the name Jo Hyun-soo, Secretary Joe. Her mind refused to believe it. How could it be him? This made no sense. Secretary Jo Hyun-soo was the loyal right hand of her father. He was the person who was supposed to meet her on the night she died, but he disappeared without a trace and left her to despair. She tried to convince herself that it couldn't be him and that it was just another person with the same name. While she was immersed in her shock, Chae Jong-hee suddenly approached her, and she deliberately poured a cup of coffee on her. Jong-hee tore the paper that was in Yoonjo's hand. Yoonjo shouted in her face, accusing her of madness, and asked her insolently about her manners. Jong-hee mocked her, saying, "Look at Hera's beautiful trash suddenly caring about manners." Then she told her with a malicious smile that she wouldn't go to that party anyway, and that she should take this as a lesson to stay in her place and not cross her boundaries. Yoonjo stood silent for moments, coffee staining her clothes. She wondered to herself how the real Na Yoonjo would have acted in this situation. Perhaps she would have stood helpless, closing her eyes and ears, waiting for the nightmare to end. But she whispered to herself, "Don't worry, Nayeon, I will protect you now." Then she raised her head and faced Jong-hee with confidence, wondering why she couldn't go, emphasizing that the manager was the one who assigned her this task, and as long as it was her work, it was her duty to complete it to the end. Chae Jong-hee mocked her words, wondering mockingly about her goal in going to the party and whether she intended to seduce some man. She added with contempt that she might think she could land a husband and change her life, but she emphasized that it wouldn't happen. She continued her insults while holding another drink cup, vowing that she would make sure Yoonjo would stick to the places that suit her lowly status. Then she poured the cup on Yoonjo's head again, elaborating on her hurtful talk, and said there are many places full of cheap and dirty things that look exactly like her. Yoonjo closed her eyes and thought with pain that she had nothing of Na-eunjo's life that spanned 28 years, except the memories of the last year only. And even in this short period, she couldn't count the number of times she was subjected to such cruel treatment. She thought in her heart how people, especially adults, could reach this degree of cruelty only for a look of deep understanding to suddenly appear on her face. Yoonjo faced her rival with a stinging question, wondering if this was the reason that drove her to frequent men's bars because it matched her real status. Shock hit Jong-hee, who muttered in confusion and wondered what she was talking about. Yoonjo continued her attack, reminding her that she met Seong-yoon-woo there and manager Kim Min-soo in a private salon, and concluded with a sarcastic question if these were the places that truly suited her level. Jong-hee couldn't control her nerves and slapped Yoonjo hard, and she shouted in her face with fierce anger, accusing her of madness and saying she had been too easy on her. But Yoonjo pushed her arm away to prevent her from hitting her again and asked her about what ease she was talking about, for she was the one who had been putting up with her all the time. And she told her that she could have exposed everything at any time, but she was holding herself back and retreating. Jong-hee wondered in confusion what she meant by exposing the matter. Yoonjo replied with a cunning smile and asked her if she didn't know the meaning and offered to explain it to her if she found difficulty in understanding. Jong-hee lost her mind and grabbed Yoonjo's hair while screaming, but a man's voice suddenly interrupted her, asking firmly what she thought she was doing. Yoonjo recognized the voice immediately and wondered in astonishment if it was indeed Park Joo-hyun. Joo-hyun addressed Chae Jong-hee coldly, wondering if this was the best she could do, which made her stammer in her speech. He followed up with his insulting talk, saying that birds of a feather flocked together and that her level was no different from Kim Min-soo's level. Then he grabbed Yoonjo's hand and ordered her to go with him and walked her away from the place. In his car, he handed her a tissue and asked her to clean herself up, noting that she was in a pitiful state. Yoonjo remained silent, so Joo-hyun looked at her intensely and ordered her to look at him. He touched her face gently and noticed that her looks didn't just carry anger, sadness, or pain, but there was something deeper and more complex, something desperate going on in her eyes. This look reminded him of the real Lee Yoonjo, and he recalled the memory of her dog, Navi's death, and how her father made a bracelet from its ashes. He remembered how he was comforting her that day, telling her it was okay to cry and that he was beside her. At that moment, her bottled-up sadness exploded and her tears poured out, so he embraced her and contained all her sadness, even swallowing her sobs. Returning to the present, he repeated his same words while wiping her tears, asking her to cry and release her feelings. Yoonjo thought that she should push him away, but she couldn't. Despite her pain from this comfort that was no longer her right, she felt she was collapsing under the weight of these lost feelings, and that his touch dissolved all her sadness and resentment. And so, even while she was in Na Yoonjo's body, she found that his warmth was the thing she could finally welcome. It was a meeting after 8 years with her first and last love, Park Joo-yeon. Yoonjo immersed herself in a deep kiss with Park Joo-yeon, surrendering to a familiar sensation she had long longed for, and felt his warm breath on her ears. They moved to a room in a luxury hotel, where Joo-yeon commented while taking off his tie on her tension that seemed as if it were their first time together. Yoonjo thought to herself that this was not the first time, but 8 years had already passed. Shyly, she told him she would take off her clothes, herself, but she needed to shower first. But she was surprised by him suddenly tearing her clothes and calling her by the name Joo-yeon, so she replied to him in shock, realizing she hated this action of his, but at the same time loved him intensely. She wondered about the reason for this contradiction and about his strange behavior today, for in all of Na Eunjo's memories, he had never touched her with such eagerness. But now the matter was completely different. She didn't know what changed him or what made him this excited. A question crossed her mind. Could the reason be that she is Lee Yoonjo? Does he feel her difference? But she soon ruled out the idea and convinced herself that the matter didn't matter. For the important thing was that she was alive and could be in his arms again. But a feeling of sadness took hold of her because she couldn't understand how he abandoned her to embrace another woman who carried her same name while he still remembered her. She wondered with pain why he abandoned her and left her trapped in that time if this was the end he wanted. Although resentment was burning inside her, she couldn't hate him because she too was unable to forget him even after she married, as if fate wanted her to understand him again. After they finished, she told him she would go to shower while he was looking at the mess in the room. Joo-yeon was thinking that the moment the tears poured from Na Eunjo's eyes, he lost all his reason because at that moment she looked exactly like the Eunjo he knew. Her reaction when their lips touched, and even the way she scratched the back of his head, everything was identical to his Eunjo. He scolded himself for these thoughts, trying to convince himself that she couldn't be Eunjo. But even when their bodies intertwined, this idea did not leave him, for her way of being shy from his touch and then melting between his fingers reminded him of her. Even her muffled moans and the way she pronounced his name were exactly identical to Eunjo, and this is the reason that made him rush toward her madly. He wondered about the reason for her crying. It was not crying of pain or rejection. The Na Eunjo he knew would have turned cold as soon as the matter ended. He loved the coldness of her lust before it became a burden on him, but he wondered about the reason for her change today. He interrupted his thoughts and made a phone call to Kim Gyu-oh, who answered him with respect. Joo-hyun ordered him to cut the investment in the film in which Chae Jong-hee acts. And if they ask about the reason, let him tell them informally that he doesn't like the lead actress. Then he ordered him to ask Secretary Jong to buy some women's clothes and send them to the Cloud Hotel for Na Eunjo, and to estimate the size himself, then ended the call. When Eunjo came out of the bathroom, she told him she would leave now, but he suggested they shower together, as there was only one bathroom. They later sat drinking tea, so Eunjo called him Mr. Manager and asked him for a favor. He encouraged her to speak, so she reminded him of his previous offer to buy her time. With a sense of sorrow, she told him she accepted the deal, thinking that she had sworn never to beg him for help. And here she was, feeling pity for her condition. She explained to him that her lease had ended and she had to move immediately, and that she had monthly installments and paintings she must take care of. So she asked him to conclude the deal as promised, 100 million won per month. Joo-hyun agreed, but he stipulated in return that she carry out her plans with him because he intended to be that trustworthy person mentioned in Eunjo's letter. And he announced that he would interfere in everything completely and would question everything from A to Z and would investigate the matter relentlessly until her doubts cleared and his hypothesis was verified. Then he asked her if that was acceptable to her. They sat in silence, and Eunjo thought that she wanted to avoid this. But in the end, she got involved with Joo-hyun again. She went back with her memory to the past, when she was standing with Park Joo-hyun in front of a painting depicting a sunset, and how she commented that if the sunset were just a beautiful red color, the matter would be boring, and its true beauty lies in the feast of light that penetrates the heavy dark clouds. She added that the stark contrast between light and shadow is what gives the scene its dynamic beauty. With a bright smile, she said that since she was forced to live anyway, she wanted a dynamic life like this. In the present, Joo-hyun was standing in his office absent-mindedly, wondering bitterly if this was the reason that made her leave the world in this tragic way. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door, and his assistant Kim Gyu entered, calling him by his title, Manager Park, and presented him with the file he requested regarding Na Eunjo. Joo-hyun looked at the file coldly and wondered to himself if there was any point in all this, then asked his assistant to leave it on the desk and that he would look at it later, settling for asking for a summary of it. Kim Gyu told him that, as expected, there was no connection at all between Lee Eunjo and Na Eunjo, at least during the past 3 years. Joo-hyun repeated to himself the phrase, 3 years, remembering that Na Eun-jo claimed she started learning painting from Yoon-jo 3 years ago and that they became close a year ago. So how is it possible that there is no trace of communication between them during 3 years? Joo-hyun asked his assistant if he had checked the Apgujeong studio, where she claimed she met her there, so he answered that that makes the matter even more suspicious. Kim Gyu explained that Lee Yoon-jo did not go to the studio throughout the past year, which means her claim that they met there was a lie. Kim Gyu wondered about her reason for resorting to lying using the name of a deceased person, then reminded Joo-hyun that his philosophy is to cut ties with liars. But Joo-hyun replied that the matter is not a lie, for the established fact is that Yoon-jo had left a letter for that woman. He added that he had analyzed the handwriting in case of any forgery, but it was certainly Yoon-jo's handwriting, and there was no room for doubt in that. Joo-hyun added, saying that something is missing. Joo-hyun thought that the letter at least is real, and this gives him a sufficient reason to interfere in the case of Yoon-jo's death, but that didn't prevent his curiosity about the real connection between the two women. So he ordered his assistant to look deeper, to which Kim Gyu replied that he had checked everything, even the CCTV cameras in the house and the studio. Kim Gyu explained that he might be an expert in hacking, but moving forward in this matter would be impossible and a crime. But Joo-hyun ordered him to look into the period preceding the 3 years, then refused his assistant's invitation to drink and left. Joo-hyun was thinking that he needed to ask Na Eun-jo something about Yoon-jo, but he was unable to reach her. At that time, Yoon-jo was dreaming of one of her memories when she was in her studio, wondering in confusion where she was and what she was doing. Secretary Jo entered and told her he had investigated the matter she mentioned. She told him she was listening, so he began his talk regarding Mr. Park Joo-hyun, confirming that he is perfectly fine and living a good life in America and looks in good health as he always was. She wondered in shock if this was what he wanted to tell her and that Joo-hyun was not in a car accident, not sick, but rather had a girlfriend. Secretary Jo confirmed that to her, unfortunately. Yoon-jo repeated in disbelief that Park Joo-hyun has another woman. The secretary explained that he had confirmed she was a fellow student of his at MIT, a Korean-American, the same age as him, and her name is Song Hana. Yoon-jo realized the bitter truth and wondered to herself if she was the only fool who waited for his return anxiously for more than 6 months. The secretary apologized to her, but she told him she understood and gave him permission to leave. But before he left, he drew her attention to her hand, which was bleeding without her feeling it. Memory took her back to the past, where she was painting a dramatic, dynamic sky. A feast of red streaked with heavy, dark clouds. She told Secretary Jo that it was all right and asked him to leave, but he hesitated for a moment, so she assured him that she wanted to be alone, and he left, understanding her wish. She sat alone before an unfinished portrait of Park Joo-hyun to recall a forgotten memory dating back nearly 7 years. It was a vivid memory. She remembered the scent of that day, the flow of light, Secretary Jo's way of speaking, and his expressions. Even her aching heart reclaimed every detail of that moment without missing a thing. In the present, she woke up feeling as if her entire body were aching as though she had been beaten, wondering if this, too, was a side effect of the synchronization process, as she had been suffering from a severe fever for the 5th consecutive day. The Navi system informed her that her previous loss of consciousness was also a side effect of her soul entering Na Eun-ju's body, and that her condition would gradually improve once the synchronization process was properly completed. She noticed her phone battery was dead and wondered how long it had been turned off. Her thoughts were interrupted by a violent knocking on the door, and she wondered anxiously who it could be, as no one was supposed to visit her. She guessed it might be the landlord, then shouted for the person to leave. But the knocking continued, so she got out of bed feeling a headache and fever, wondering if the front door had always been this far away. The door opened, and she was surprised to see CEO Jung So-hyun. So-hyun asked her with great concern how she was, only for Eun-ju to fall unconscious into her arms. Then a blue digital screen appeared before her, announcing the completion of the synchronization process. She woke up to find herself in a hospital room, smelled the scent of alcohol, and wondered in confusion about the identity of the man standing by her bed. It was Park Joo-hyun. She wondered if she was dreaming, but his image was perfectly clear. She woke from her stupor, realizing his presence, and wondered in shock why the CEO was here. Her memory went back to what happened 5 days ago. After their meeting at the hotel, Joo-hyun had invited her to a fancy dinner and then drove her home. As she was about to leave, he asked her if there was something she wanted. She wondered what he meant, and he coolly replied that he would pay the price for her being a substitute for another woman, just as he had done last time. She thought to herself that it wasn't like that, and frankly, she felt satisfied with a relationship free of any commitments. to the point that she almost forgot the fact that he had abandoned her. Nevertheless, she felt disappointed. He had told her it was different from the last time, that something had changed, but in the end, he considered their relationship merely a deal. She answered that she didn't want that she was done with that kind of relationship, and there was no need to pay, for she did it because she was attracted to him. He spoke her name with emotion, but she warned him not to misunderstand, assuring him that she would not cling to him as she did in the past, and that this didn't mean she held any feelings for him. Then she told him that he had bought her time, so from now on she would share everything she knew about teacher Lee Eun-ju. She added that it would not go beyond that, and that they should focus on work. She returned to the present sitting on the hospital bed, thinking that meeting him again 5 days after their breakup in such an embarrassing way seemed very strange. He asked her if she felt better, and she replied that she was fine. CEO Jung So-hyun entered the hospital room with features of worry on her face, calling out to Navi to be reassured of her condition after she woke up. Yoon-ju asked if CEO Park Joo-hyun was the one who brought her to the hospital, and So-hyun explained that he felt worried because he couldn't reach her, so he asked her to check on her at her apartment, which made Yoon-ju think to herself about this concern of his. So-hyun continued, asserting that if it weren't for Joo-hyun, the consequences would have been dire, and told her that the doctor diagnosed the cause of the high fever as a buildup of fluid in her lungs. So-hyun wondered in astonishment if she had gone swimming, relaying the doctor's surprise at her survival, which he described as a miracle. Eun-ju was shocked by the presence of fluid in her lungs. Eun-ju realized the shocking truth. The cause of the real Na Eun-ju's death was drowning, and the presence of fluid in her lungs was nothing but a remnant of her death that synchronized with her consciousness transfer. She wondered in horror if she had become like the living dead, a being that shouldn't be alive after inhabiting the body of the deceased Na Eun-ju. While So-hyun was urging her to receive treatment to drain the fluid, Yoon-ju interrupted her firmly, declaring she was fine and had to go to work as an assistant at the Year Club party. She was determined not to waste time and to devote herself to pressuring Kang Jin-woo and searching for Secretary Jo. But So-hyun and Joo-hyun surprised her with the news that her colleague I-soo would take over this task instead of her, which astonished her, and drove her to ask about the reason for this sudden change. So-hyun explained that actress Chae Jung-hee had caused a huge stir and threatened to withdraw from the movie if Eun-ju attended the party, as Jung-hee was also a member of that club. Anger flared within Yoon-ju, who wondered indignantly about this absurdity, asserting to herself that she must go to that party regardless of Chae Jung-hee's threats. Yoon-ju demanded the task be returned to her, but So-hyun apologized, explaining that it was a matter of the company's interests and had already been settled and could not be reversed. At that point, Joo-hyun, who was watching the situation, intervened and offered for her to go with him, not as an assistant, but as his guest, revealing that he also held an invitation to the party. After finishing the hospital discharge procedures, Yoon-ju left, thinking that she had to go home and prepare for the party, with only 6 hours left until it started. She walked on her way feeling anxious about not having appropriate clothes for the party, thinking she would have to borrow something from the company. But she feared she would look modest in a way that didn't suit being Joo-hyun's partner. A luxury black car stopped beside her, and Park Joo-hyun stepped out in full elegance, wearing a formal suit. She looked at him, repeating his name in her heart, Park Joo-hyun, who was her first and last love. Seeing him in the past seemed like a complex and intractable thread to her, but after the night they spent together, she felt that complexity had begun to fade a little. She reminded herself that in his eyes she was just Na Eun-ju, and that she could only meet him by borrowing this body. So she decided to surrender to her feelings and the fluttering of her heart without resistance. She also decided to embrace her heart's pain and her overwhelming longing for him, and to live these feelings with everything they held. Joo-hyun interrupted her thoughts, reminding her of their meeting at the Cloud Hotel tonight, and that she would attend as his partner at the party. Then he added in a joking tone that he couldn't allow her to attend looking shabby, which piqued her and made her wonder and shock if he was calling her a hobo. Joo-hyun commented that this irritability was not characteristic of the Na Eun-ju he knew, who usually didn't care about such matters. Then he opened the car door for her and invited her to get in so they could go and get her ready for the party. He took her to a luxury salon where he instructed the staff to prepare her from head to toe without worrying about the cost, and that they should choose the dress in the end, confirming that he would return to pick her up at exactly 5 o'clock. After undergoing a full care and beauty session, she was asked to rest in the VIP room until it was time to choose the dress. Eun-ju appeared with renewed and different features. Eun-ju wondered if he had finished getting himself ready, only for a voice from outside her field of vision to tell her that she had arrived early, as it wasn't 5 o'clock yet. The voice was Joo-hyun's, who had already put on his formal suit, and he explained that he came to check on his partner and make sure she was receiving the best preparation possible. In a childish way, he teased her, saying he couldn't leave her to choose a strange dress behind his back. Eunju agreed in her heart that Na Eunju's taste in party dresses was indeed eccentric. While they were sitting together, he told her there was something he wanted to talk about, which piqued her curiosity and drove her to wonder about the nature of this talk. Joo-hyun looked at her seriously and decided to get straight to the point. He called her Eunju, then asked her his shocking question. Did she think Eunju had been murdered? With an expression full of certainty and a gaze that recalled the scene of her tragic death, Eunju answered his question with a definitive yes. Joo-hyun asked her for her evidence, and she simply replied calmly and confidently, pointing to him, CEO. But he rejected this logic, asserting that the message Lee Eunju left alone was not sufficient evidence, and warned her that if she was planning to file a lawsuit to stop the inheritance procedures based only on that message, she was completely wrong and would lose the case 100%. She needed more solid evidence. Eunju agreed with him, but added that the fact she was alive now was evidence in itself, and for that specific reason, she was going to the party to search for more evidence. She explained to him that there was someone she had to check something with at that party, someone who knew exactly what teacher Lee Eunju did on the day of her death. Then she corrected herself, explaining that it went beyond mere knowledge. It was someone who was moving with her, and she revealed his identity. It was Secretary Jo Hyun-soo, her late father's personal assistant and the man who placed the smartwatch on her wrist. Joo-hyun repeated the name Jo Hyun-soo in astonishment, while Eunju thought that if the smartwatch had worked as it should, it was possible that Secretary Jo possessed that evidence. Joo-hyun immediately regained his memory, asserting that he knew Jo Hyun-soo well, as he was the last person he saw before leaving Korea. In a flash from the past, Joo-hyun saw himself as a young man, listening to Secretary Jo conveying President Lee's orders to leave immediately, and his desire to sever any future ties between them. Despite young Joo-hyun's pleas and his desperate hope to see Eunju just one last time, Secretary Jo remained firm, assuring him that he could not see her, that their paths were completely different, and asking in a harsh tone if he really thought Park Dae-sun's son could stay with President Lee Won-gyu's daughter. The secretary pressured him to leave quietly for his father's sake, threatened that he would tell Eunju he had met another woman if she asked, and ordered him not to dream of anything else and to behave as befits the son of Park Dae-sun. Those words were like fatal stabs. Secretary Jo used his father as a shield to completely tear his heart apart, drawing two parallel lines that could never meet between him and Eunju. Joo-hyun returned to the present with a faint smile, commenting that he never expected to hear that name again. Eunju told him she had been unable to reach Secretary Jo since that day, despite all her diligent attempts to find him. Joo-hyun wondered skeptically if this disappeared secretary would actually attend the party, explaining that the Year Club was very selective and it was impossible to invite a mere secretary unless he was from an influential family like his assistant Kim Gyu-oh. When he asked her if she was sure, she replied that she wasn't, and for that reason she had to check for herself. She explained that she had glimpsed the name Jo Hyun-soo on the guest list, and that she hadn't heard of anyone else in this social circle with the same name, besides the fact that the club president, Kim Min-soo, doesn't extend his invitations to just anyone. Joo-hyun thought about her words and saw that Na Eunju was the ordinary person who shouldn't be invited to a place like this, and wondered in confusion how she knew the secrets of high society so accurately. He asked her if she would go to confirm the matter herself, and she answered in the affirmative. Then she added with determination that she also planned to approach Kang Jin-woo at the party. Joo-hyun interrupted their talk, pointing his finger and announcing that the dress was ready, and ordered it to be brought in. A group of female employees entered pushing a collection of clothes, explaining that they had prepared exclusive designs that hadn't been officially released in Korea yet. One of them commented on the purity of Eunju's skin. In the blink of an eye, Joo-hyun made his decision, pointed to a black dress, and ordered them to take the rest out, which piqued the employee's curiosity, who wondered if he would choose only the black one. Joo-hyun replied that he was in a period of mourning and asked the manager to leave the dress and go. Eunju wondered anxiously if the manager left too. Who would help her? Only for Joo-hyun to surprise her by asking if she needed help getting dressed. Then he grabbed a piece of her clothing and offered help with a side smile. Eunju's face flushed with embarrassment, and he suggested they continue their talk while she changed her clothes. As she headed toward the fitting room, she told him to ask whatever he wanted, and that she would answer everything, thinking to herself that it was fine. Let her earn the full 100 million won. While Eunju was about to change her clothes behind a velvet curtain, Park Joo-hyun caught her off guard by suddenly pulling the curtain aside, driving her to scream in his face, denouncing his action. But he met her shock coldly, reminding her that she hadn't felt embarrassed about undressing in front of him in the past. Then he handed her an elegant black necklace and ordered her to wear it. She stared at him in confusion, wondering about the reason for that sharp look of his. While he was trying to place the necklace around her neck, he suddenly grabbed her shoulder. She jumped, calling his name in surprise as he gripped her wrist firmly. Joo-hyun fixed his gaze on her shoulder and demanded she explain what he was seeing. A butterfly tattoo had appeared that wasn't there before. He pushed her robe aside slightly to reveal the tattoo clearly, and she wondered in shock why it was there. It was the wind butterfly, the logo she designed in high school that became her signature mark in all her paintings. Joo-hyun looked at her angrily, asserting that this tattoo wasn't there 5 days ago when they were together, and demanded an immediate explanation. He grabbed her shoulder, repeating his demand sharply for her to explain why this tattoo was there. Unju stammered in her speech, and he pressured her more, wondering if it was a tattoo, and threatened her that if she admitted it, he would go himself to the place where she got tattooed to find out how they got this specific design. Unju found herself in a predicament. She didn't know the truth of this butterfly, but she was forced to answer that it was a tattoo, wondering in confusion what else it could be. She tried to end the situation, claiming she designed the tattoo herself and pushed him away, asking him to leave. While she was hiding behind the curtain, the Navi system suddenly addressed her, revealing that this butterfly was the mark of the completed synchronization between her soul and Na Eunju's body. Eunju wondered about the meaning of completed synchronization, and the system confirmed that she had now fully settled in Na Eunju's body, and that there would be no more side effects from now on. She touched the butterfly on her shoulder, wondering in confusion if she was supposed to feel relieved about this. At that moment, Joo-hyun was thinking about her, having become certain in his heart that that look in her eyes could only belong to Lee Eunju. Eunju closed her eyes, thinking that he must have gone mad too, but she felt grateful for this moment. He thought to himself, "We are both mad, you and I." She put on her black dress and elegant shoes and walked toward him, feeling a strange tension just by standing before him. She told him she had to insist until the end that the butterfly was just a tattoo, claiming it was her way of mourning and expressing grief. Joo-hyun surprised her by presenting a black jewelry box and asked her not to misunderstand. He opened the box to reveal the black necklace and asked her to turn around so he could help her wear it. As he was fastening the necklace around her neck, she felt his burning gaze piercing the back of her neck. He asked if she knew something, then commented that the Na Eunju he knew wouldn't have felt embarrassed by this much touching. His memory returned to the old Na Eunju, that woman who could stand naked in a lit room without blinking an eye. But now, just baring her neck was enough to make her flush, and he wondered in confusion about the cause of this change. Eunju answered him boldly. Perhaps the reason was that she liked him. But he met her confession with sarcasm, asserting that they both knew there was nothing between them and that even a stray dog would laugh at this claim. But she told him that he didn't hate this confession, while she thought to herself that he feels, or at least senses unconsciously, that the color of her soul has changed. At that moment, Eunju wondered how he had spent those 8 years without her, and if there were circumstances she was unaware of, and if his departure was against his will. She wondered in pain if he had missed her as much as she missed him, and thought that she had been killed and then returned to life by a miracle. She had intended to burn this second life in the fire of revenge, but she whispered to herself that a little rest like this should be permitted. She thought to herself that this was a chance to be in the arms of the man she loved more than her life, and that it was fine to seize it. She allowed him to look at the butterfly, and he told her calmly that he would share her mourning. He revealed to her that the necklace he gave her wasn't just jewelry, but a precise camera that records sound and image and sends the footage directly to his phone. He reassured her that even if they couldn't see Secretary Joe with their own eyes, they could review the recording later, and asked her only to make sure to film all the attendees at the party. Then he warned her against causing trouble as she did last time, and stressed the need to stay calm. She entered the lavish party hall, and Eunju began examining the faces carefully, desperately searching for Secretary Joe and wondering where he was. But instead of him, her eyes fell on Kim Na-in, who was walking with another man. She thought with bitter sarcasm that even if Na-in wore all her belongings from head to toe, the shoes weren't hers, and guessed she couldn't cut her toes to fit them. Her memory went back to the past, where Kim Na-in was nothing but a simple and kind girl from Jeju whom she met while volunteering at the Midas Care Center. She was a former beauty queen and worked as an obscure model and actress, but she didn't get a real chance, which drove her to join a computer academy in search of an ordinary job. Despite her circumstances, she was diligent in her volunteer work, which Yoon-ju found impressive. Moved by her generosity, she offered for her to leave the academy and stay by her side, and appointed her as her personal secretary. In her capacity as an external director at CX Soft at the time, she tasked her with taking care of her paperwork and managing the household. Even when she discovered her illicit relationship with Kang Jin-woo, she felt nothing but pity for her and remained silent despite knowing everything. Her pity reached the point that she was ready to tell her she could have Jin-woo if that would make her happy. That reflected the extent of her deep hatred for Kang Jin-woo and the extent of the pity she felt for Na-in. This feeling of pity continued until she discovered the horrific truth. It wasn't Kang Jin-woo who was doing it, but Na-in herself, who was mixing all those drugs and sleeping pills in her drink. Her betrayal was, in a way, more painful than Jin-woo's betrayal. If her relationship with him had been just a business partnership, it would have been easier. But she had actually given Na-in a corner of her heart. Faced with this painful memory, Yoon-ju felt suffocated and decided she needed to go out and breathe some fresh air. While she was heading to the balcony, she heard Chae Jung-hee's voice talking with a group of women about Na-in's ridiculous behavior, commenting sarcastically that a leopard never changes its spots. Chae Jung-hee continued her insulting talk, wondering what the former Miss Jeju could do if she wasn't selling herself. Then she criticized her body, claiming her large chest made her look clumsy before the camera and that the bagel girl trend was over. Eunju listened in shock, wondering how she could pretend to be close to Kim Na-in and then speak ill of her behind her back this way. Young-hee revealed that Na-in managed to snag a rich man, but he's married, and that she threw herself at him to seduce him. Worse than that, she deliberately approached his wife. As it turned out, all the money was in the wife's name. Then, Eunju realized the full truth. Na-in had approached her as well because of Kang Jin-woo and her wealth. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her from behind. She was surprised to find it was her colleague, Yang Isu. Isu whispered in her ear, asking her to leave immediately, because Chae Jung-hee would explode with anger if she saw her. But Eunju ignored her warning and ordered her to move away quietly. She was determined to listen. Eunju told her colleague that if she was afraid of being exposed because of her, she should help her out of this predicament, and promised she would buy her dinner. Young-hee continued her talk, explaining that Na-in tried every way to seduce that man with her beautiful body, and when she failed, she concluded he was a lost cause, and after that, the wife died. One of the women interrupted Young-hee's talk, commenting that she knew who she meant, and wondered if she was referring to that place. But Young-hee warned her against going further in the conversation, threatening her that she would surely be sued if she continued. Another lady commented that Na-in's luck is still bad. The man doesn't seem to think about marriage at all, even though less than a month has passed since his wife's death, which is a bit excessive. Young-hee agreed, adding that if she pressures him too much because of her impatience, she will be abandoned, and then that will be her end, body and soul. Then she whispered with a wicked smile, suggesting that this might be the reason for her desperation to get pregnant now. But she wondered about the point of that as long as the man doesn't love her. Eunju listened to the talk while Chae Jung-hee was saying that the dead wife is the only one who evokes pity, as all her money will be enjoyed by her husband and his mistress. Eunju felt bored and decided to head back inside. She turned around to be surprised by Kim Na-in standing before her, and wondered in shock how long she had been standing there. Angry features were drawn on Na-in's face. It seemed she had heard everything Chae Jung-hee said about her. Eunju recalled Na-in's previous words, and how she used to describe herself as the shameless one who possesses no pride, and that she doesn't care about losing a bit of it as long as it doesn't feed her. That was the phrase she always repeated after every failed audition, and Eunju had thought then that it was persistence and perseverance, and considered her unwavering stance impressive. But now she realizes all that was just acting. This was her true face, trembling with anger. She approached Na-in, thinking that it seems they are in the same boat. Na-in asked her defiantly if they were friends, then denounced knowing her, wondering who she was. Eunju answered calmly that she knew who she was and that she was the elder Kim Na-in. Then she approached her and whispered that she was just like her, a third-rate model no one cares about. Then she asked her if she knew what to do when someone tries to crush her. In a strong tone, she answered herself, "Crush them with power, Brian," for to her, money is power and authority. She described the feeling of desperately longing for what you don't have and struggling to climb to the top, only to be pulled down again. Then she asked her with a smile if she had more money than the actress Chae Jung-hee, and when Na-in wondered how she knew that, she answered that her dress looked more expensive than Young-hee's. She pointed to Na-in's ruby-studded necklace and commented that the bright red ruby carries its owner's soul, and that seeing this red color makes her realize that her soul, too, is not ordinary, just like her own. She continued her spirited talk, asking her not to sit hidden and shrinking into herself. Elsewhere at the party, Park Joo-hyun was talking with a guest who asked him if he had come alone. Joo-hyun replied that he came with his partner, and the guest commented with disappointment that he had intended to introduce him to a lady, for there is a line of them waiting for a chance to get to know him. Joo-hyun pointed to Kang Jin-woo, who was standing alone, and suggested that Jin-woo is the one who needs an introduction, as he seemed to have come alone tonight. Jin-woo heard the talk and responded with perfected acting, denouncing the idea of being introduced to another woman while Yoon-ju was by his side. Joo-hyun thought that this was pathetic acting, then commented that Jin-woo must have been on very good terms with his wife, which Jin-woo immediately agreed with. Joo-hyun continued his talk, noting that Jin-woo is an unusual man. The rich are usually happy about their wives' deaths, but he is not. Jin-woo replied that he is not one of those men, as he married Yoon-ju out of deep and tragic love. Joo-hyun thought sarcastically that CX Soft must feel relieved now, and that it's hard to believe an awkward man like this had actually planned to kill Yoon-ju. While Jin-woo was watching the expressions on his face, he decided to play along with him a little in this game. Park Joo-hyun faced his rival Kang Jin-woo coldly, stating that he was planning to avoid him if they met by chance that night, and explained that his only motive for considering investing in CX was Yoon-ju's existence. But after her departure, he no longer had any intention of investing at all. But he added in a sarcastic tone that after seeing the sincere grief Jin-woo shows over her loss, he might be inclined to reconsider his decision. Kang Jin-woo seized the opportunity immediately, responding with a forced smile that such a decision would please Yoon-ju very much, as she loved CX more than anyone else. This response aroused disgust in Joo-hyun, who thought to himself how this vile man could use his deceased wife's memory to fish for an investment, but he agreed with him outwardly, saying that of course she loved it. Kang Jin-woo added that that was the company her father built with all his life sacrifices. Jin-woo feigned surprise, wondering if Joo-hyun knew that, and concluded that they must have been very close since she told him such a thing. Joo-hyun answered him calmly, confirming that he and Eun-ju were at one time extremely close. Then he corrected his speech to soften the impact of his words, adding that their relationship was more like that of siblings. But Jin-woo was not convinced by this lie, and thought to himself sarcastically that they were clearly lovers. He already knew about a relationship between them through lawyer Do Woo-jung, and wondered if Park Joo-hyun was the reason Yoon-ju didn't give him an atom of her heart throughout their marriage. She was, in his eyes, an ice woman. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone from a caller he registered as sweetheart, and he grumbled in his heart at her bothering him after he had arranged an invitation for her to the party. While he was about to answer, he caught sight of a woman standing nearby who caught his attention. It was the woman he met in the law firm lobby, and he remembered her name was Na-eun-ju. He watched her while ignoring the call, thinking of her beautiful face and strange aura, and how her attempt to hide and not draw attention makes her stand out more. He smiled to himself, seeing in her a resemblance to his late wife, and commented in his heart that she was cute, just like Yoon-ju. Meanwhile, Yoon-ju was searching anxiously around the hall, but she found no trace of Secretary Jo. Her despair grew as she realized she had no information about him, and she began to doubt whether he had attended the party at all, or if the Jo Hyun-soo mentioned in the list was someone else entirely. She looked at the attendees with disgust, asserting to herself that this party was nothing but trash as she expected, a place where people show off their money, talk behind each other's backs, and exchange illegal information and shady deals. And it added to her nausea seeing drunken men harassing women, and she thought that the video recording her necklace was capturing would be scandalous when reviewed later. Suddenly, she stopped in her place, having smelled a familiar scent of perfume that awakened a painful memory in her. Kang Jin-woo appeared before her smiling, greeting her by saying they meet again. His scent immediately brought her back to the moment of her murder, where she recalled his fatal words as he injected her with poison, bidding her farewell and asserting that he would put her inheritance to good use. She returned to reality with paleness on her face, and Jin-woo approached with feigned concern and asked if she was okay, reminding her of their meeting in the lobby of Hansel Law Firm. He emphasized her name, Na-eun-ju, then pretended to be offended when she didn't seem to remember him. Eun-ju suppressed her anger, calling him a filthy scoundrel in her heart. He reminded her that he was the one who caught her when she almost fell that day, asserting that it was impossible for him to forget that. She remembered every detail of that meeting, his voice, his expressions, his scent, and even the feeling of disgust that overcame her when his arm touched her body. Despite her intense desire to push him away, she composed herself. She pretended not to remember, apologizing that she couldn't recall the situation, for she knew she needed a direct link with Kang Jin-woo if she wanted to uncover the truth. He invited her to have a drink with him, offering champagne or wine. She thought sarcastically how she could drink with her killer. Yoon-ju apologized politely, explaining that she would drink with him another time and that she had to find her partner now. But he insisted and grabbed her hand to prevent her from leaving. Eunju jumped back forcefully and pushed his hand away, screaming for him to leave her alone, only for broken glass to scatter on the floor. A look of anger appeared on his face that Eunju did not miss. She knew that look well. It was the anger that overcomes a man like him who has never been accustomed to rejection. Anger seemed to consume him as he muttered the word, "you," having suppressed his rage with difficulty. Eunju remembered Ju Yun's warning to her not to cause trouble, but she wondered to herself what she could do in a situation like this, while Kang Jin-woo stood before her, clenching his hand tightly. The situation drew the attention of some attendees who recognized Kang Jin-woo, vice chairman of CX, and wondered in confusion about the identity of the woman they had never seen before with him. Eunju realized that Na Eunju's scandals always started this way, with someone's initiative followed by harassment, then a struggle, only for rumors to spread and her reputation to be damaged every time. She had resolved not to let a silly scandal obstruct her path toward Trifle. So with a loud voice, she suddenly announced that she knew Mrs. Kim Na-in. Kang Jin-woo was struck by astonishment at this sudden declaration, and Yoon-ju followed it with a more confusing question about whether Kim Na-in was in love with him. She knew that two people who conspired to murder cannot easily separate, and that the betrayal of either toward the other means falling into the abyss together. And that was what made Kim Na-in the perfect excuse to reject him. She pretended innocence as she asserted that she wouldn't dare touch a man belonging to the lady who is her senior. At that moment, Park Ju-hyun suddenly appeared, calling her Yoon-ju and taking her hand to go with him. Then he put his arm around her and faced Kang Jin-woo directly, reminding him clearly that he had attended this party without a partner because he is still unable to forget his deceased wife. Jin-woo stammered in his speech, only for Ju-hyun to interrupt him sharply, asking him to behave accordingly and not to try to approach his partner. Then he directed a direct threat to him that if he soured his mood, he would not hesitate for a moment to withdraw his investment.